Ladies and gentlemen, we need to discuss the Henderson Industries merger before... Nadia Benson's presentation comes to an abrupt halt as the subway car lurches violently, throwing passengers against metal poles and into each other. Her tablet flies from her hands, spinning through the air in slow motion as bodies collide and briefcases scatter across the floor. A pair of steady hands catches her sketch notebook mid-flight, fingers closing around it with impossible timing. Nadia finds herself pressed against a stranger's chest. His heart beats steady while hers hammers against her ribs. She looks up to meet warm brown eyes framed by slightly unruly black hair, a face that holds both mischief and genuine concern. "If your life breaks like that," he says, carefully returning her notebook while helping her steady herself, "do you want an airbag or a hug?" The question hits her harder than the sudden stop. Nadia Benson hasn't had an unplanned moment in 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Her digital planner contains every minute from 6 a.m. wake-up to 10:30 p.m. wind-down routine, color-coded and optimized for maximum productivity. Yet here she stands, staring at this stranger who just asked the most ridiculous, beautiful question she's ever heard. She laughs, actually laughs, a sound that surprises them both. It bubbles up from somewhere deep, genuine and unguarded, the first emotion today that wasn't scheduled between conference calls. She starts, then realizes she doesn't have a scripted response for this moment. Her planner didn't account for subway emergencies or philosophical questions from handsome strangers with healing hands. "Central Station, next stop," announces the conductor, and the man, Ji-ho, she notices from the community center volunteer badge on his jacket, steps back with a gentle smile. "Maybe you don't need either," he says, moving toward the doors as the train slows. "Maybe you just need to trust the brakes work when they need to." The doors slide open and he's gone, leaving only the lingering scent of cinnamon and something clean, like fresh rain. Nadia stands frozen as commuters flow around her, clutching her notebook against her chest. For the first time in years, she's completely present in a moment she didn't plan, feeling something she can't categorize or optimize. She checks her smartwatch, 8:47 a.m. She's officially 2 minutes behind schedule, and somehow, impossibly, she doesn't care. 3 days later, Nadia walks into the Riverside Community Center for her company's mandatory social responsibility project, armed with clipboards, timelines, and a detailed presentation about maximizing corporate community impact through strategic partnership initiatives. She's prepared for everything, except finding the volunteer coordinator from the subway standing at the front of a kitchen filled with seniors, tying an apron around his waist with the confidence of someone who belongs exactly where he is. "Class, I'd like you to meet Nadia Benson from Henderson Design," he says, those same warm eyes finding hers across the room. "She's here to help coordinate our memory food workshop." Her clipboard slips slightly in suddenly damp palms. The perfectly structured presentation in her tablet seems absurdly inadequate as she takes in the scene. Elderly hands kneading dough, stories flowing between measuring cups, laughter seasoning every conversation. "Hello again," Ji-ho says quietly, stepping closer. "Ready for another unplanned moment?" When someone unexpectedly shifts the wheel of your carefully controlled life, do you fight for the driver's seat or learn to navigate together? If you're already curious about where this journey leads, make sure you're subscribed. Because sometimes the most beautiful destinations are the ones we never planned to visit. "Your itinerary shows 47 minutes allocated for this workshop," Nadia announces, consulting her tablet while trying to ignore how Ji-ho's presence seems to fill the entire kitchen. "I've prepared a structured observation protocol that should capture all necessary data points for our quarterly community impact report." Ji-ho doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he moves to the stove where a large pot simmers, releasing clouds of aromatic steam. The seniors, 12 regulars, Nadia notes automatically, watch him with the fond attention usually reserved for beloved grandchildren. "Mrs. Martinez," Ji-ho says to a silver-haired woman whose hands never stop moving, even when she's not cooking. "Tell us about the sofrito your grandmother made." Rosa Martinez's face transforms, years falling away as she begins describing the careful balance of garlic, peppers, and cilantro. Her words paint pictures of a cramped kitchen in San Juan, the sizzle of onions and olive oil, the way her abuela's hands moved like dancers while she worked. Nadia's pen hovers over her evaluation form. There's no checkbox for the way Mrs. Martinez's voice grows stronger as she talks, or how the other seniors lean in, adding their own memories like ingredients to a shared recipe. 47 minutes, she repeats, louder this time. Why 47? Jiho asks, still stirring the pot. Why not 45 or 50? The question catches her off guard. Because that's what fits the schedule. I have a client meeting at 10:30 and accounting for travel time. But what if the memory isn't finished yet? Mrs. Martinez laughs, a sound like silver bells. Mijo, memories don't follow clocks. They take as long as they take. Nadia feels something flutter in her chest, anxiety mixed with an emotion she can't name. Control is her superpower, the skill that built her career and kept her life running smoothly. But in this warm kitchen filled with stories and steam, her carefully constructed schedule feels as fragile as rice paper. I need to document, she begins. Document this, Jiho interrupts gently, ladling soup into a bowl and offering it to her. Mr. Kim's healing broth. He's been perfecting it for 63 years. The elderly Korean man beams, his weathered hands clasped together. For my wife, he says softly, when she had cancer. Every day, I made different version until I found one that made her smile. Nadia accepts the bowl with trembling hands. The broth is golden, complex, carrying flavors she can't identify but somehow recognizes. It tastes like devotion, like hope simmered slowly over decades of love. Her smartwatch buzzes. 9:17 a.m., 13 minutes over schedule. She should leave. Should stick to the plan, make her client meeting, file her report about adequate community engagement metrics. Instead, she finds herself sitting on a wooden stool between Mrs. Martinez and Mr. Kim, asking about ingredient ratios and family traditions, while Jiho watches her with quiet satisfaction. How long have you been teaching here? She asks during a lull in the conversation. 6 months. I used to work at Le Bernardin. The admission comes quietly, almost reluctantly. Nadia nearly chokes on her soup. The Michelin-starred restaurant? You left fine dining for this? Something shudders in his expression. I left fine dining for this, he confirms, but she hears the defensive edge in his voice. Her watch buzzes again. 9:33 a.m. She's officially missing her client meeting, a fact that should terrify her but somehow doesn't. Around them, the seniors continue sharing stories, their voices weaving together like a complex harmony. I have to ask, she says finally, why the 47-minute question? What's special about that number? Jiho's smile returns, soft and mysterious. It's not the number that's special. It's what you do when the timer runs out and you realize you don't want to stop. Nadia's phone explodes with notifications the moment she steps outside the community center. 7 missed calls from her assistant, 14 unread emails, and 1 text from her mother that simply reads, Called your office. They said you missed Henderson meeting. Are you okay? She's not okay. She's 42 minutes behind schedule, her perfectly organized day in shambles, and somehow she feels more alive than she has in months. The taste of Mr. Kim's soup lingers on her lips, along with the memory of Jiho's knowing smile when she'd asked for the recipe. Nadia. Marcus Chen's voice cuts through the street noise as her colleague's black sedan pulls up to the curb. Get in, now. She slides into the passenger seat, already preparing her apology. Marcus is everything she usually admires in a colleague, driven, focused, ruthlessly efficient. Today, his intensity feels suffocating. Henderson rescheduled for tomorrow morning, but they're not happy, he says, pulling into traffic with aggressive precision. What the hell happened in there? You missed $1 million pitch for a cooking class? It wasn't just a cooking class. The words surprise her with their firmness. It was complicated. Complicated doesn't close deals, Nadia. Complicated doesn't pay for your designer apartment or fund your retirement account. Marcus's knuckles whiten on the steering wheel. You've been our most reliable asset for 3 years. Don't start getting creative now. Asset. The word sits wrong in her stomach, sour and cold. When did she become an asset instead of a person? When did reliability become her defining characteristic? The community center project has potential, she says carefully. Real potential. Not just for PR, but for genuine impact. Impact doesn't matter if we can't measure it in revenue streams. Your job is to package their little charity kitchen into something that looks good in our quarterly reports, not to get emotionally involved with the volunteers. Jiho's face flashes through her mind, the quiet confidence as he'd helped Mr. Kim adjust his seasoning, the way he'd listened to Mrs. Martinez's stories like they were precious gifts. Emotionally involved doesn't begin to cover what she'd felt in that kitchen. Her phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for staying past the timer. The seniors loved having a real audience for their stories. Jay. She stares at the message, heat climbing her neck. How did he get her number? More importantly, why does seeing it make her want to smile? Who's texting you? Marcus asks, glancing over. Work thing. She lies smoothly, the deception feeling foreign on her tongue. Marcus drops her at the office building, engine idling impatiently. Henderson meeting is at 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow. Don't make me regret defending you to the partners. Nadia watches his sedan disappear into traffic, then looks up at the glass tower that houses Henderson Design. 43 floors of ambition and achievement, each window reflecting the same hungry gleam. She spent 3 years climbing those floors, checking every box, exceeding every expectation. So why does the idea of walking back into that perfectly climate-controlled environment make her feel like she's suffocating? Her phone buzzes again. Another text from Jay. Farmer's market tonight at 8. Vendor making Mr. Kim's grandmother's kimchi. Interested in learning the story behind the story? She should say no. Should go home, review her Henderson presentation, prepare talking points that will smooth over today's disaster. Should return to the safe, predictable world where every minute has a purpose and every emotion has an appropriate time slot. Instead, she finds herself typing. Address? His response comes immediately. Corner of 5th and Pine. Look for the woman with the strongest opinions about fermentation. Despite everything, the missed meeting, Marcus's disappointment, the chaos she's created in her perfectly ordered life, Nadia finds herself laughing on a busy downtown sidewalk, drawing curious looks from passing commuters. For the first time in 3 years, 2 months, and 19 days, she's about to do something completely unplanned. The realization should terrify her. Instead, it feels like coming alive. The Pike Place Market after hours is a different world entirely. Gone are the tourist crowds and street performers. What remains is a community of vendors and night shift workers, the people who keep the city fed and functioning while everyone else sleeps. Nadia finds herself walking through near-empty stalls, following the sound of distant conversation and the rich smell of fermenting vegetables. She spots Jiho before he sees her, deep in animated discussion with a tiny Korean woman whose hands gesture emphatically as she speaks. Even from a distance, Nadia can tell this woman doesn't just make kimchi. She guards its secrets like a dragon hoards gold. You came, Jiho says when he notices her approach, and there's genuine surprise in his voice. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I, Nadia admits. She's traded her professional blazer for jeans and a simple sweater, but she still feels overdressed for this late-night gathering of food lovers and insomniacs. Mrs. Park, meet Nadia. She's the one I told you about, the woman learning to taste stories. The elderly woman studies Nadia with sharp eyes that seem to catalog everything from her posture to her handbag. You work for big company? Yes, ma'am. Henderson Design. Mrs. Park nods slowly. My grandson work for big company too. 60 hours a week, no time for family, no time for real food. He eat lunch from machine. She makes a disgusted sound. You eat lunch from machine? Nadia thinks about her usual routine. protein bars between meetings, salads consumed while reviewing emails, coffee that serves as both breakfast and afternoon snack. Sometimes, she says quietly. Aigu. Mrs. Park shakes her head. Come, try real food. Then we talk. The next hour passes like a fever dream. Mrs. Park leads them through a tasting tour of her fermented empire. Kimchi that ranges from tangy and fresh to complex and deeply funky, each variety telling the story of a different season, a different mood, a different family recipe carried across oceans and decades. This one, Mrs. Park says, offering Nadia a small portion on a wooden spoon. I make when my husband die. Very sad kimchi. Too much salt from crying. The kimchi is indeed salty, but underneath the brine is something else, a depth of flavor that speaks to grief transformed into nourishment, sorrow fermented into sustenance. Nadia feels tears prick her eyes, though she can't explain why. Every batch tells story, Mrs. Park continues. Happy kimchi, angry kimchi, homesick kimchi. You understand? Nadia nods, thinking about her own life. What story would her refrigerator tell? Efficiency kimchi? Anxiety kimchi? Control-freak kimchi made with precise measurements and no room for improvisation? What about you? Jiho asks quietly as Mrs. Park moves on to help another customer. What story is your food telling? The question hits too close to home. Nadia's kitchen is a monument to meal prep and optimization. Protein portioned into containers, vegetables pre-chopped and vacuum-sealed, everything designed to eliminate decision-making and waste time. I don't think my food tells stories, she says. It just functions. Everything tells a story. Even the absence of story is a story. Around them, the market hums with quiet energy. Vendors break down displays, sweep floors, share leftover samples with each other and the few wandering customers. It's a community built around feeding people, around the ancient human ritual of sharing food and stories. Why did you really leave Le Bernardin? Nadia asks suddenly. Jiho's hand still on the jar of kimchi he's been examining. You don't want to hear that story. I do. I really do. He's quiet for so long she thinks he won't answer. Finally he speaks, his voice barely audible above the market's ambient noise. I was working garde-manger, cold station. Salads, appetizers, nothing glamorous. But I was good at it. Really good. Started getting noticed by the sous chef, then the executive chef. They moved me to sauces, then fish, then meat. That sounds like success. It was, for a while. The pressure, the perfection, the way every plate had to be exactly identical to the last. I thought that was what excellence looked like. Then one night, service was particularly brutal. We were behind. The critics were in the dining room, and I was trying to perfect this sauce that just wouldn't come together. His hand moves unconsciously to the scar on his right hand. I cut myself. Deep. Should have gone to the hospital, but the head chef just wrapped it up and told me to keep going. The sauce doesn't care about your blood, he said. Perfect the plate. Nadia's stomach churns. Did you? I finished the sauce. Got it perfect. Sent out 300 covers that night, each one exactly like the photo in the cookbook. And when I got home at 2 a.m., I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back at me. Mrs. Park returns, studying their serious faces. Too much talking, not enough eating. Here. She hands them each a container of kimchi. Take home. Make rice, make story. As they walk back through the quiet market, Nadia finds herself matching Jiho's slower pace instead of rushing ahead. So you just left? Took me 6 more months. I kept telling myself I was learning, growing, becoming something better. But I was just becoming smaller. More precise, maybe. But smaller. They emerge onto the street, where the city sparkles in the distance. Nadia's apartment is 26 blocks north, her Tuesday morning routine waiting to resume in 6 hours and 43 minutes. The community center found me, Jiho continues, not the other way around. I was doing temp work in restaurant kitchens, nothing permanent, when they put out a call for cooking instructors. Figured I'd teach basic knife skills, maybe some simple techniques. But it became more than that. It became everything that restaurant work wasn't. No critics, no reviews, no identical plates. Just people sharing stories through food, learning that every family recipe carries history, every shared meal builds community. They've reached the corner where they need to part ways. Ji-ho toward the apartment he shares with 2 roommates in Capitol Hill, Nadia toward her pristine 1-bedroom with its meal prep containers and color-coded calendar. Same time tomorrow? He asks, and the question hangs in the air between them like a challenge. Nadia thinks about Marcus's warning, about the Henderson meeting waiting tomorrow morning, about the carefully constructed life she's spent years building. Then she thinks about Mr. Kim's healing soup, Mrs. Martinez's sofrito memories, and the way genuine community feels when you're experiencing it instead of just documenting it. I'll be there, she says, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Ji-ho smiles, the expression transforming his entire face. Bring your appetite for stories. Mrs. Martinez promised to teach us her grandmother's mole recipe. As Nadia watches him disappear into the night, she realizes she's committed to another unplanned moment, another disruption to her carefully maintained schedule. The thought should fill her with anxiety. Instead, it feels like the first real choice she's made in years. Henderson Design's conference room gleams like a shrine to corporate success. Polished table reflecting overhead lights, ergonomic chairs positioned at precisely measured intervals, digital displays ready to showcase whatever presentation will secure the next big contract. Nadia sits across from James Henderson himself, the silver-haired founder who built his empire on the principle that everything can be improved through better design and strategic thinking. Ms. Benson, Henderson says, adjusting his titanium-framed glasses. Marcus tells me you've identified an opportunity in the community engagement space. Nadia's tablet lies closed on the table, her usual arsenal of charts and projections untouched. Instead, she thinks about Mrs. Martinez's hands moving like dancers, about Mr. Kim's 63 years of perfecting soup, about the way stories travel through generations via carefully guarded recipes. I have, she says, then takes a breath that tastes like possibility. But I'd like to show you rather than tell you. Henderson's eyebrow rises slightly. Marcus shifts uncomfortably in his chair. Show us, Henderson asks. I'd like to invite you to experience the Riverside Community Center's Memory Food Workshop firsthand, not as observers documenting community impact metrics, but as participants. The silence that follows is sharp enough to cut. Marcus's expression suggests she's just proposed setting the conference room on fire. Ms. Benson, Henderson says carefully, I appreciate creative thinking, but our quarterly community engagement report needs quantifiable data, not experiential learning. What if I told you that 3 hours in that kitchen could teach you more about genuine brand loyalty than 6 months of focus groups? She's improvising now, working without a net, and the freedom of it is both terrifying and exhilarating. Mrs. Martinez has been shopping at the same grocery store for 27 years, not because they have the lowest prices, but because the manager remembers her name and asks about her grandchildren. Mr. Kim drives across town to buy ingredients from a vendor who helped him when he was learning English 30 years ago. Henderson leans forward slightly, the first sign of genuine interest. That's not customer retention through rewards programs or promotional campaigns, Nadia continues, her voice gaining strength. That's connection built through authentic human interaction, trust earned through consistent presence and genuine care. It's the kind of brand loyalty you can't buy. You have to cultivate it. And you think a cooking class demonstrates this principle? I think a cooking class creates it. When Ji-ho, Chef Park, teaches these seniors to make their family recipes, he's not just sharing techniques. He's helping them preserve their histories, validate their experiences, connect their past to their present. Every participant becomes an ambassador for that experience. Marcus clears his throat. But how do we monetize authentic human connection, Nadia? How do we scale genuine care? The question hangs in the air like smoke. It's the right question from a business perspective, the logical next step in any proper pitch. But something about the way Marcus phrases it, monetize authentic connection, makes Nadia's stomach turn. Maybe, she says slowly. That's the wrong question. Henderson's other eyebrow rises now. Excuse me? Maybe instead of asking how we monetize connection, we should ask how we create conditions where genuine connection becomes the natural outcome. Maybe instead of scaling care, we help our clients understand that real care doesn't scale. It multiplies. She's walking a tightrope now, and she knows it. But she thinks about Jiho's hand stirring Mr. Kim's soup, about the way the seniors' faces transformed when they shared their stories, about the difference between being seen as an asset and being valued as a human being. Henderson Design has built its reputation on improving systems and optimizing outcomes, she continues. What if we helped our clients understand that the most powerful system is one that makes every individual feel genuinely valued, not as a demographic or a target market, but as a whole person with stories worth hearing? The room falls quiet. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle continues its busy morning routine. Commuters rushing to meetings, construction crews building new towers. Everyone moving with the focused intensity of people who know exactly where they're supposed to be. You're suggesting we restructure our entire community engagement philosophy based on a cooking class with senior citizens, Henderson says finally. I'm suggesting we restructure our entire approach to human-centered design based on what I learned in one morning about the difference between authentic community and performative charity. Marcus makes a strangled sound that might be protest or panic. Henderson studies her for a long moment, his sharp eyes taking in details she can't interpret. Finally, he speaks. Show me. Sir? Your kitchen classroom. I'll give you 2 hours tomorrow afternoon. If you can demonstrate that authentic human connection creates more sustainable engagement than traditional community relations approaches, we'll discuss restructuring the Riverside project. Nadia's heart hammers against her ribs. She's just committed to bringing Henderson Design's founder to a community center kitchen where seniors share family recipes and tell stories that can't be quantified in quarterly reports. And if I can't? Henderson's smile is sharp. Then you'll return to documenting community impact through traditional metrics, and we'll never speak of cooking classes again. As the meeting ends and Marcus escorts Henderson to his next appointment, Nadia remains seated at the polished table, staring at her reflection in its perfect surface. She's just risked everything on the belief that what happens in Jiho's kitchen matters more than what appears in corporate presentations. Her phone buzzes with a text. How did the meeting go? Jay. She stares at the message, then types back. I'm bringing my boss to meet Mrs. Martinez tomorrow. Pray for me. The response comes immediately. Mrs. Martinez has been praying for you since Tuesday. She says you have good hands but a nervous heart. She's making extra mole. Despite the magnitude of what she's just committed to, despite Marcus's horrified expression and Henderson's skeptical smile, Nadia finds herself laughing in the empty conference room. Tomorrow, she'll discover whether genuine human connection can survive in a world that measures everything in revenue streams and quarterly reports. Tonight, she needs to call Jiho and ask if he's ready to cook for the man who could either transform their program or shut it down entirely. For the first time in her professional life, she has no backup plan, no contingency strategy, no carefully prepared talking points. She's never felt more alive. The community center kitchen at 3 p.m. looks different than it does during morning workshops. Afternoon light streams through high windows, casting golden rectangles across prep tables where Jiho arranges ingredients with the focused precision of someone preparing for battle. Nadia arrives early, her professional armor, tailored blazer, tablet loaded with backup presentations, feeling simultaneously essential and completely wrong for this space. Nervous? Jiho asks, without looking up from the onions he's dicing. Terrified, she admits, then immediately regrets the honesty. Professional Nadia doesn't admit terror, especially not to someone who could become a complication if this partnership fails spectacularly. Good. Mrs. Martinez says fear makes the best seasoning because it means you care about the outcome. Did Mrs. Martinez really say that, or are you making it up to make me feel better? Jiho's smile is answer enough. The seniors begin arriving at 3:30. Mrs. Martinez with her canvas grocery bag full of mysterious spices, Mr. Kim carrying a thermos of homemade tea, Eleanor Washington with her famous cornbread that somehow tastes different every time, but remains consistently perfect. They move through the kitchen with the easy familiarity of people who've found their place in the world. "Mija," Mrs. Martinez says, pulling Nadia aside. "You bring the important man today?" "Very important. The most important." "Ah." Mrs. Martinez nods sagely. "Then we feed him properly. Men who make big decisions need to remember they still have stomachs and hearts, not just calculators in their heads." At exactly 4 p.m., Henderson arrives with Marcus trailing behind like a nervous shadow. Nadia watches her boss take in the scene. The worn linoleum, the mismatched chairs, the ancient but well-maintained equipment. This kitchen probably cost less than Henderson's office furniture. "Mr. Henderson," Jiho says, wiping his hands on his apron before extending one in greeting. "Welcome to our memory kitchen." "Chef Park." Henderson's handshake is firm, evaluative. "I understand you trained at Le Bernardin?" "Among other places. But I learned more about cooking in my grandmother's kitchen in Busan than I ever did in Manhattan." Henderson's expression suggests he's filing this information away for later analysis. "And what exactly will we be preparing today?" "We're not preparing anything," Mrs. Martinez interjects, appearing at Henderson's elbow with the stealth of someone accustomed to managing difficult personalities. "We're sharing. Big difference." Before Henderson can respond, she's guided him to a station between herself and Eleanor Washington, both women moving with the patient authority of teachers who've spent decades coaxing reluctant students toward understanding. "First rule," Mrs. Martinez announces to the room. "No watches in the kitchen. Time belongs to the food, not the clock." Nadia sees Henderson's hand move instinctively toward his Rolex, then stop. Marcus looks physically pained at the suggestion. "Second rule, everyone tells a story while they cook. Food without story is just fuel. We make medicine here, not fuel." What follows over the next 90 minutes defies every principle of efficient meeting management Nadia has ever learned. There are no agendas, no clearly defined objectives, no measurable outcomes. Instead, there's Eleanor teaching Henderson how to feel when cornbread batter has the right consistency. "Not by looking, Mr. Henderson, by listening. Hear how the spoon sounds different when the texture changes." There's Mr. Kim showing Marcus the precise angle for cutting scallions, while explaining how his father taught him the same technique during the Korean War. Sharp knife, gentle hands, always respect the ingredient. And there's Mrs. Martinez, somehow managing to extract Henderson's full attention as she demonstrates the patient process of building mole from scratch, layer upon layer of flavors that refuse to be rushed, each spice toasted individually until it releases its secrets into the warm air. "This chocolate," she tells him, grating a bar of dark chocolate that looks like it's been blessed by saints. "My great-grandmother brought the recipe from Oaxaca. Took her 3 tries to find the right cacao here in Seattle. She said American chocolate tastes like sadness because it's made too fast. No patience for the proper blessing." Henderson, who hasn't touched actual cooking ingredients in probably 20 years, finds himself grinding chilies on a stone molcajete, while Mrs. Martinez explains the difference between heat that punishes and heat that warms. "In my grandmother's village," she continues, "mole wasn't just food. It was medicine for heartbreak, celebration for weddings, peace offering for family fights. One recipe, but different power depending on who makes it and why." "That's remarkably inefficient," Henderson observes, but his tone suggests fascination rather than criticism. "Efficient for what?" Mrs. Martinez asks with the innocent directness of someone posing a genuinely curious question. Henderson pauses, molcajete balanced in his hands. "For scaling production, ensuring consistent quality control." But consistent for who? My mole tastes different when I make it for my daughter's birthday than when I make it for my neighbor's funeral. Same recipe, different love. Which one is the correct version? Across the kitchen, Nadia watches this exchange while mechanically chopping vegetables under Eleanor's patient guidance. She's supposed to be managing this demonstration, ensuring it stays on message and delivers clear takeaways for Henderson's consideration. Instead, she's witnessing something she can't control or direct. Authentic human connection happening at its own pace, in its own way. Ms. Benson, Henderson calls across the kitchen. Are you documenting this process? Her hand moves toward her tablet, then stops. I'm participating in it, she says instead. The kitchen falls quiet except for the sound of simmering mole and Mr. Kim's gentle humming. Henderson studies her for a moment that feels suspended in time. Good, he says finally, because I have questions, and they're not the kind that fit in quarterly reports. As the afternoon light fades and the mole reaches its complex, perfect completion, Nadia realizes something has shifted in the room. Henderson is asking Eleanor about her grandmother's cornbread legacy. Marcus is actually laughing at something Mr. Kim said about the stubbornness of proper kimchi fermentation, and she's standing in a community center kitchen, watching corporate executives discover what happens when efficiency takes a back seat to authentic human connection. Mija, Mrs. Martinez whispers, appearing beside her with the stealth of a practiced grandmother. You're an important man. He has good hands but a hungry heart. Like you. What does that mean? Means he's been feeding the wrong part of himself for too long. Tonight, he remembers that success tastes better when it's shared. As if summoned by her words, Henderson approaches, a bowl of mole-topped chicken in his hands. Ms. Benson, I need to ask you something. Nadia's stomach clenches. Yes, sir? Do you think what happened here today can be replicated? Not the mole recipe, the feeling, the connection? Can this be scaled without losing what makes it work? It's the question she's been dreading, because she doesn't have a clean answer. I think it can be multiplied, she says carefully, but not scaled, not in the traditional sense. Explain. Every community center, every group of people who gather to share stories through food, they'll create their own version of this. Their own Mrs. Martinez, their own family recipes, their own healing through connection. We can't replicate the exact experience, but we can create conditions where similar experiences become possible. Henderson nods slowly, tasting the mole with the focused attention he usually reserves for financial projections. And Henderson Design's role would be? To design systems that support authentic community building instead of manufacturing artificial engagement. To help our clients understand that real connection can't be bought or programmed, it can only be cultivated. That's a significant departure from our current service model. Yes, sir, it is. Henderson takes another spoonful of mole, and Nadia watches something subtle shift in his expression. Mrs. Martinez, he calls across the kitchen. This mole, how long did it take you to perfect the recipe? 47 years, she replies without hesitation. But still learning, always still learning. Henderson catches Nadia's eye, and she sees understanding pass between them. Some things can't be rushed, can't be optimized, can't be reduced to efficient processes. Some things require patience, presence, and the willingness to value connection over control. We'll need to completely restructure the Riverside partnership, he says quietly. Are you prepared for that level of change? Nadia thinks about her carefully planned life, her scheduled emotions, her terror of the unexpected. Then she looks around the kitchen at faces made bright by shared stories and the ancient ritual of preparing food together. I think I'm ready to find out, she says. As Henderson and Marcus prepare to leave, Mrs. Martinez presses containers of leftover mole into their hands. For tomorrow's lunch, she insists. But heat it slow, with patience. Microwave kills the soul of the mole. Standing in the doorway, watching Henderson's Mercedes disappear into Seattle traffic, Nadia feels the same disorientation she'd experienced on the subway a week ago. Her professional life has just taken an unexpected turn that she initiated but can't control. How does it feel? Jiho asks, joining her in the doorway. Like I just jumped out of an airplane and remembered I don't know how to fly. But you jumped anyway. Yeah, I jumped anyway. As they walk back into the kitchen to help with cleanup, Jiho's hand brushes hers. Accidental contact that sends electricity up her arm and settles somewhere dangerous in her chest. For someone who's spent years managing risk and avoiding complications, Nadia is accumulating an alarming number of both. Same time tomorrow? He asks, echoing his question from the market. This time she doesn't hesitate. Same time tomorrow. Nadia's morning routine crumbles at 7:23 a.m. when her phone dies mid-alarm, leaving her disoriented in an apartment that suddenly feels foreign without its digital soundtrack. No weather app to tell her whether to carry an umbrella, no traffic updates to optimize her commute route, no stream of emails to transform her coffee time into productivity. She stands in her kitchen, holding a mug of coffee that tastes different when consumed without the distraction of responding to overnight messages, and realizes she doesn't know how to exist in unstructured time anymore. Her landline rings, a relic from a previous tenant that she kept meaning to disconnect. Jiho's voice fills her pristine apartment like sunlight through windows that haven't been opened in months. My grandmother used to say that broken things make space for miracles, he says without preamble. Want to test her theory? My phone died. I don't know what's happening in the world. I know what's happening in my world. Mrs. Martinez is teaching advanced mole techniques to anyone brave enough to handle ghost peppers, and Mr. Kim brought his nephew's guitar for what he's calling soul food and soul music. Interested? Nadia looks around her apartment. Every surface clean and organized, every minute accounted for, every possibility of surprise carefully eliminated. It's beautiful in the way a museum display is beautiful. Perfect, untouchable, and completely sterile. I don't have GPS, she says, which isn't really an answer to his question, but feels like the most honest response she can offer. Even better. Meet me at the corner of Pine and Broadway in 20 minutes. We'll navigate by curiosity instead of satellites. The phone goes dead, leaving Nadia staring at the receiver while her coffee grows cold in her hands. 20 minutes isn't enough time to research optimal routes or prepare contingency plans. It's barely enough time to get dressed and trust that her feet remember how to find their way through a city she's lived in for 5 years, but rarely actually explores. She arrives at Pine and Broadway with 2 minutes to spare, discovering that punctuality feels different when it's not mediated by constant clock checking. Jiho leans against a lamppost, sketchpad in one hand and thermos in the other, looking like someone who's never experienced anxiety about anything more serious than whether coffee tastes better with honey or sugar. Ready for an adventure in inefficiency? He asks. I don't think I know how to be inefficient anymore. Lucky for you, I'm an excellent teacher of impractical skills. What follows is 3 hours of deliberately lost wandering through neighborhoods Nadia has driven through hundreds of times, but never actually experienced. They discover a bookstore that serves tea in mismatched cups, where the owner insists on recommending books based on what your hands want to hold today, rather than bestseller lists or professional development categories. They find themselves in a tiny Ethiopian restaurant where the elderly proprietor explains spice combinations while teaching them to eat with their hands, transforming lunch into a lesson about trust and vulnerability. In my culture, the woman explains as she demonstrates proper injera technique. Sharing food from the same plate means you trust each other not to take more than your share. It's practice for sharing life. Nadia watches Jiho tear off a piece of the spongy bread, scoop up spiced lentils, and offer the bite to her with matter-of-fact intimacy. She's spent her adult life maintaining careful boundaries, professional distances, appropriate separations between different aspects of her identity. The idea of eating from someone else's fingers should feel too intimate, too presumptuous. Instead, it feels like the most natural thing in the world. Your turn, he says after she accepts his offering, and the simple role reversal, her feeding him, his eyes closing in appreciation, creates a connection that has nothing to do with efficiency or professional networking. They walk through Volunteer Park afterward, where Jiho produces a sketchpad and begins drawing the conservatory while explaining his theory that buildings have emotions just like people do. Look at the way the glass curves, he says, pencil moving in confident strokes across paper. It's not just functional, it's hopeful, like someone designed it believing that beautiful things deserve beautiful homes. Nadia finds herself lying on grass that probably contains allergens and definitely wasn't part of her planned day, watching clouds move across a sky she usually experiences only as weather data on her phone screen. "Can I ask you something?" Ji-ho says, not looking up from his sketching. "Depends on what it is. When did you start living like you were afraid of your own life?" The question hits like cold water, shocking and clarifying at the same time. "I'm not afraid of my life. I'm organized. There's a difference." "Is there?" He sets down the sketch pad and turns to face her, those warm eyes serious now. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you've built a very elaborate system for avoiding spontaneous feelings. Spontaneous feelings are inefficient. They derail productivity and create unnecessary complications. Like right now?" "What do you mean?" "Right now, lying on grass in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon, talking to someone you barely know about things that don't fit in your quarterly planning sessions. How does this feel?" Nadia considers lying, offering the socially appropriate response that maintains proper boundaries. Instead, she finds herself telling the truth. Terrifying, and wonderful, and completely unsustainable. Why unsustainable? Because I have responsibilities, a career, a 5-year plan, a retirement account that needs consistent contributions, and a professional reputation that requires reliable behavior. The words tumble out faster now, as if speaking them quickly will make them feel more true. I can't just wander around the city eating Ethiopian food and lying on grass. That's not how successful people build successful lives. Ji-ho is quiet for a long moment, his attention apparently focused on adding shading to his conservatory sketch. "My grandmother," he says finally, "survived the Korean War by walking from Seoul to Busan with my grandfather and their 3 children. Took them 6 weeks, carrying everything they owned in 2 small bundles." Nadia waits for him to continue. "She used to tell me that the difference between surviving and living is knowing when to follow the map and when to trust your feet. The map got them to refugee camps and safe places to sleep, but their feet led them to the people who shared food, the families who offered shelter, the moments of joy that made the journey bearable." That's a beautiful story, but it's not really applicable to modern professional life. Isn't it? He shows her the sketch, the conservatory rendered in precise architectural detail, but surrounded by loose, expressive drawings of people and trees and sky. This is what you're afraid of, not chaos, not failure. You're afraid that if you stop controlling every minute, you might discover you actually enjoy living your life instead of just managing it. The accusation stings because it tastes like truth. Nadia sits up, grass clinging to her sweater, and looks around the park where people walk dogs and push strollers and read books in the afternoon sunlight. Everyone else seems to know how to exist in unstructured time without losing their sense of purpose or direction. "I don't know how to live without the plan," she admits quietly. "The plan is how I stay safe, how I avoid ending up like my mother." "What happened to your mother?" The question opens a door Nadia has kept carefully locked for years. She fell in love with someone who promised her adventure and spontaneity and beautiful, unpredictable moments. He left when I was 7, taking all the adventure with him and leaving us with unpaid bills and an apartment we couldn't afford. Understanding settles across Ji-ho's features like sunrise. "So you learned to never trust anything you couldn't control." I learned that structure is more reliable than feelings. That professional success is more sustainable than romantic optimism. That women who plan for the worst don't get surprised by it. They sit in silence for several minutes, watching Seattle continue its busy afternoon routine around them. Finally, Ji-ho speaks. "What if the plan is wrong?" "Excuse me?" "What if your very careful, very logical plan for avoiding your mother's mistakes is actually keeping you from having the life she wanted, but couldn't figure out how to build?" Before Nadia can respond, her dead phone somehow chirps from her pocket, a ghost notification from a device that shouldn't be functional. She pulls it out to find that it's mysteriously resurrected itself, screen blazing with 17 missed calls, 43 unread emails, and 12 text messages from Marcus, escalating from concerned to frantic to mildly threatening. "The world has been looking for you," Jiho observes. "The world always looks for me. That's the problem." But even as she says it, scrolling through messages that transform her beautiful afternoon into a catalog of small emergencies and routine urgencies, Nadia realizes something has shifted. The anxiety that usually accompanies being disconnected from her digital leash feels different now, less like panic and more like resistance to returning to a system that suddenly seems arbitrary rather than essential. "I should go," she says, but the words lack conviction. Should or want to? It's another question that demands honesty she's not sure she's ready to give. Both. Neither. "I don't know anymore." Jiho stands and offers her a hand up from the grass. The brief contact, his palm warm against hers, fingers calloused from years of chopping vegetables and sketching architectural details, sends electricity through her nervous system that has nothing to do with static and everything to do with connection. "Same time tomorrow?" he asks, and she realizes this has become their ritual, this daily invitation to step outside the life she's constructed and into something she doesn't have words for yet. "I can't keep doing this," she says, but she doesn't let go of his hand. Doing what? Falling apart and calling it growth, abandoning responsibility and calling it healing, risking everything I've built for something that might not even be real. His thumb traces across her knuckles, a touch so gentle it makes her want to cry. What if it is real? What if this is the most real thing that's happened to you in years? The question hangs between them like a bridge she can choose to cross or burn. Behind her lies the safe shore of scheduled emotions and managed risks. Ahead lies territory she's never mapped. Territory that requires trust instead of control, presence instead of planning. "Same time tomorrow," she whispers, finally letting go of his hand before she loses the courage to choose uncertainty over safety. As she walks back toward her car, phone buzzing with the urgency of a world that demands immediate attention, Nadia catches her reflection in a storefront window. Grass stains on her sweater, hair slightly mussed from lying on the ground, eyes bright with something that looks suspiciously like joy. She looks like someone who's been living instead of just managing life. For the first time in years, she likes what she sees. Henderson Design's emergency partnership meeting convenes at 8 a.m. sharp in the glass conference room overlooking Elliott Bay, where Seattle's morning fog creates a backdrop that would be poetic if anyone had time for poetry. Marcus has arranged presentation materials with military precision, charts documenting community center engagement metrics, projected ROI calculations, and a detailed timeline for what he's calling authentic connection implementation strategy. Nadia arrives 7 minutes late, still wearing grass stains from yesterday's unscheduled afternoon in the park, to find Henderson studying a document that makes her blood run cold. The original Riverside Community Center partnership contract, marked with red ink annotations and sporting several yellow sticky note flags. "Ms. Benson," Henderson says without looking up, "please explain Clause 17. Every molecule of caffeine in her system crystallizes into panic. Clause 17. She wrote Clause 17 herself, back when the Community Center project was just another assignment in community relations optics, before Mrs. Martinez taught her about patience-blessed chocolate, and Mr. Kim showed her that healing can be simmered into soup. Clause 17 addresses intellectual property rights," she says carefully, sinking into her chair while her brain scrambles to remember exact wording. "Specifically?" Marcus clears his throat. Clause 17 grants Henderson Design exclusive rights to document, package, and redistribute any community programming methods, recipes, or cultural practices shared during the partnership period for use in future client engagements. The words hit the conference room like stones thrown through glass. Nadia feels her carefully constructed professional identity cracking along fault lines she didn't know existed. "In layman's terms," Henderson continues, "we own the rights to commercialize Mrs. Martinez's mole recipe, Mr. Kim's therapeutic cooking methods, and whatever other family traditions get shared in what they believe is a safe community-building space. That's not how I intended it," Nadia says weakly. "But it's what you wrote and signed. and what they agreed to when they welcomed us into their kitchen. The accusation hangs in the air like smoke from something burning. Nadia thinks about Mrs. Martinez carefully teaching her to toast chiles, about Mr. Kim sharing the story behind his healing broth, about the way the seniors' faces transformed when they realized someone was genuinely interested in their memories and traditions. They trusted her, and she weaponized that trust in legal language designed to extract value from their generosity. The good news, Marcus says, apparently oblivious to Nadia's moral crisis, is that this gives us tremendous leverage for expanding the program. We can package the memory food concept for retirement communities nationwide, license the methodology to assisted living facilities, maybe even develop a branded cookbook series. Mrs. Martinez's grandmother's mole recipe in a branded cookbook. Nadia's voice comes out sharper than she intended. Mr. Kim's healing soup marketed to corporate cafeterias? Exactly. We're looking at potentially millions in licensing revenue. Henderson sets down the contract and studies Nadia with the focused attention of a surgeon examining something unexpectedly complicated. You seem troubled by this development, Ms. Benson. I thought this was precisely the kind of innovative partnership strategy you were advocating. I was advocating for authentic community connection, not cultural appropriation disguised as corporate social responsibility. The silence that follows could be measured in heartbeats. Marcus's expression suggests she's just set fire to her own career, while Henderson's face reveals nothing except professional interest in watching how this conversation unfolds. Cultural appropriation is a strong accusation, Henderson says finally. What would you call taking family recipes shared in trust and repackaging them for commercial distribution, without meaningful compensation or ongoing community benefit? I'd call it standard intellectual property management in a consulting engagement. And I'd call it exactly the kind of extractive corporate behavior that destroys genuine community relationships in favor of quarterly profit margins. The words are out before she can stop them, carrying the weight of every conversation with Mrs. Martinez about family traditions, every story Mr. Kim has shared about preserving cultural memory through food, every moment of authentic connection she's experienced in that community center kitchen. Marcus makes a strangled sound. Henderson leans back in his chair, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. Ms. Benson, are you suggesting Henderson Design abandon a legally binding contract that could generate significant revenue in favor of, what exactly? Altruistic community service? I'm suggesting we honor the spirit of partnership instead of hiding behind the letter of a contract that was written before we understood what we were actually dealing with. And what are we actually dealing with? Nadia takes a breath that tastes like possibility and professional suicide in equal measure. Real people sharing real stories that have sustained families through generations of struggle and joy. Cultural treasures that can't be reduced to intellectual property or packaged for mass distribution without losing everything that makes them valuable. Valuable to whom? To the people who created them. To the communities they serve. To the understanding that some things are more important than revenue streams. Henderson's pen taps against the polished table surface, a sound like seconds ticking toward some inevitable deadline. Outside the conference room windows, Seattle continues its morning routine. Commuters rushing to meetings, construction crews building new towers, everyone moving with focused intensity toward clearly defined objectives. Ms. Benson, Henderson says finally, you're asking me to walk away from a contract that could fund our community engagement initiatives for the next 5 years in favor of preserving the cultural integrity of a cooking class. Yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm asking. And if I refuse? The question hangs between them like a bridge she can choose to cross or burn. Behind her lies the safe shore of professional compliance and financial security. Ahead lies territory that requires choosing integrity over advancement, community over career. Then I resign, she says quietly, because I can't be part of commodifying the trust those people placed in us. Marcus looks like he's witnessing a car accident in slow motion. Henderson continues his pen-tapping rhythm, each click marking another second in which Nadia's professional future hangs in balance. Finally, he speaks. You realize you're potentially throwing away a partnership that benefits both organizations? I'm potentially saving a partnership that could benefit both communities. There's a difference. Explain. Nadia's heart hammers against her ribs, but her voice remains steady. What if instead of owning their cultural practices, we helped amplify them? What if instead of licensing their recipes, we created sustainable funding streams that kept their programming community controlled? What if we designed systems that generated ongoing support for their work instead of one-time extraction of their intellectual property? Henderson stops tapping his pen. Go on. The seniors don't need us to package their wisdom for mass consumption. They need us to help them share it directly with people who will value it appropriately. We could design platforms for intergenerational cultural exchange, develop funding models that support community-led programming, create networks that connect similar initiatives across the city. That's considerably more complex than cookbook licensing, and considerably more sustainable, and ethical, and likely to generate the kind of authentic community impact that actually changes lives, instead of just improving quarterly reports. The conference room falls silent except for the hum of climate control and the distant sound of Seattle traffic. Marcus stares at his presentation materials like they've betrayed him. Henderson studies the contract annotations with the focused attention of someone calculating odds he hadn't previously considered. This would require completely restructuring our approach to community partnerships, he says finally. Yes, sir, it would. It would mean admitting that our current model prioritizes corporate benefit over community welfare. Yes, sir. It would mean that too. Henderson closes the contract folder and looks directly at Nadia for the first time since the meeting began. And you're willing to risk your position here on the belief that this restructure is not only possible, but necessary? I'm willing to risk my position on the belief that some things matter more than keeping my position. The admission surprises her with its certainty. 3 weeks ago, she would have found 17 different ways to rationalize Clause 17, would have convinced herself that commercializing community wisdom was actually a form of cultural preservation. Now, the idea of profiting from Mrs. Martinez's family recipes or turning Mr. Kim's healing practices into corporate training modules makes her physically sick. Very well, Henderson says, standing to signal the meeting's end. I'll give you 48 hours to draft a proposal for this alternative partnership structure. If you can demonstrate that ethical community engagement is more profitable than intellectual property extraction, we'll proceed with your recommendations. And if I can't, then you'll implement Clause 17 as written, or find employment elsewhere. As Henderson and Marcus file out of the conference room, Nadia remains seated at the polished table, staring at her reflection in its perfect surface. She's just committed to designing a business model that prioritizes community benefit over corporate profit, challenging everything Henderson Design has built its reputation on. Her phone buzzes with a text from Ji-ho. Mrs. Martinez wants to teach you her grandmother's tamale recipe today. Says you have good hands but need practice with patience. Interested? She stares at the message, then types back. More interested than I've ever been in anything. But I need to ask you something important first. Can you meet me for coffee before the workshop? Everything okay? I need to confess something that might change how you feel about me, about us, about everything we've been building. The response comes immediately. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. Corner coffee shop in an hour? Despite everything, the impossible deadline, Henderson's ultimatum, the weight of having to choose between career security and moral integrity, Nadia finds herself smiling in the empty conference room. For the first time in her professional life, she's about to risk everything on the belief that doing the right thing matters more than protecting her position. It's the most terrifying and liberating feeling she's ever experienced. The corner coffee shop buzzes with the comfortable chaos of morning regulars and laptop nomads, but Nadia barely notices the familiar soundtrack of espresso machines and muted conversations. She sits across from Ji-ho in a booth that's seen decades of first dates, business meetings, and difficult conversations, nursing a cup of coffee that tastes like sawdust, while her stomach churns with the weight of confessions she's not sure she's brave enough to make. You look like someone preparing for surgery, Ji-ho observes. wrapping his hands around his own mug with the gentle precision she's come to associate with everything he does. I feel like someone about to perform surgery. On myself. Without anesthesia. He waits with the patient silence of someone accustomed to letting people find their own way to difficult truths. I need to tell you about Clause 17, she begins, then stops, realizing he has no context for what that means. I need to tell you why I'm really at the community center, why Henderson Design is really there. I assumed it was for some kind of corporate community relations project. It is, but it's worse than that. The words feel like stones in her mouth. We have legal rights to everything shared in your workshops. Every recipe, every story, every cultural practice. Henderson Design can package and commercialize all of it. Jiho's expression doesn't change, but something shifts behind his eyes. Commercialize how? Cookbook deals, corporate training programs, licensing agreements with retirement communities. Basically anything Mrs. Martinez teaches us about mole can be repackaged and sold to the highest bidder. The silence that follows feels dense enough to touch. Around them, the coffee shop continues its morning rhythm. Orders called out, conversations flowing, the city conducting its daily business. But in their booth, time has stopped, while Jiho processes what she's just told him. Does Mrs. Martinez know? He asks finally. She signed the contract, but I doubt she read the fine print. Nobody reads the fine print. That's what we count on. We? The pronoun sits between them like an accusation. Henderson Design. The company that's paying me to document your program so we can replicate it without you. Jiho sets down his coffee cup with deliberate care. And you're telling me this because? Because I can't do it. Because everything I've experienced in your kitchen has taught me that some things are more valuable than revenue streams. Because I'm falling in love with... She stops, the admission catching in her throat like smoke. With what? With the way you all share stories like they're medicine. With the patience Mrs. Martinez shows when she's teaching. With the healing that happens when people feel genuinely seen and valued. She pauses, meeting his eyes directly. With you. The confession hangs in the air between them, impossible to take back. Jiho's face reveals nothing except careful attention to whatever internal calculation he's performing. So what happens now? He asks. I have 48 hours to design an alternative partnership model that prioritizes community benefit over corporate profit. If Henderson approves it, we restructure the entire relationship. If not, she shrugs. I probably lose my job, and you lose your programming funding. And you're willing to risk that? I'm willing to risk everything for the chance to do something right instead of just profitable. Jiho is quiet for a long moment, studying the dregs of his coffee like they might contain answers to questions she hasn't thought to ask. Finally, he speaks. My grandmother used to make kimchi in these huge ceramic jars, ongi. Takes weeks to ferment properly, and you can't rush the process. Too much heat, too much pressure, and you ruin the whole batch. Nadia waits for him to connect the metaphor to their situation. But the most important part wasn't the fermentation. It was what she called the jar of truth. This moment when you taste the kimchi and discover whether all that patience and careful attention produced something nourishing or something spoiled. And this is our jar of truth moment? This is when we find out whether what we've been building together can survive honest examination. The weight of his words settles over her like a blanket she's not sure she wants to accept. Everything between them, the shared meals, the afternoon wandering through neighborhoods, the growing sense that she's discovering parts of herself she'd forgotten existed, all of it has been built on foundations she's just revealed to be compromised. Are you angry? She asks quietly. I'm disappointed. In the situation, not necessarily in you. What's the difference? The situation was designed to extract value from vulnerable people. You were just doing the job you were hired to do, until you realized the job was wrong and chose to risk your position rather than continue doing it. So you don't hate me? His smile is small but genuine. Nadia. I've watched you discover that authentic connection matters more than professional advancement. I've seen you choose vulnerability over control, presence over planning. I've watched you fall in love with community in ways that are changing everything about how you move through the world. But I need to know that you're making these choices for the right reasons. Are you restructuring the partnership because you believe community-centered approaches are more ethical and sustainable? Or because you want to impress me with your moral evolution? The question cuts deeper than she expected. She thinks about her mother's warnings about men who promise adventure and leave behind chaos, about her own carefully constructed life built around avoiding exactly this kind of complicated emotional territory. I don't know, she admits. Maybe both. Maybe I can't separate my feelings for you from my growing understanding that the life I was living wasn't actually living at all. That's honest. Is honest enough? Jiho reaches across the table and covers her hand with his. The touch sends electricity through her nervous system, but also something deeper. A sense of being anchored to something solid and real, in a world that suddenly feels full of possibilities she hasn't learned how to navigate yet. Let's find out, he says. Design your alternative partnership model. See if you can create something that serves community instead of exploiting it. If you can, if we can prove that ethical engagement is more valuable than extractive contracts, then we'll know this is about more than just romance complicating your professional judgment. And if I can't, then we'll know that too. They sit in silence for several minutes, hands connected across the small table, while Seattle continues its purposeful mourning around them. Finally, Nadia speaks. Will you help me? Not with the business model. I need to figure that out myself. But with understanding what the community actually needs versus what Henderson Design thinks it wants to provide? Of course. Even though I'm essentially asking you to help me design a system that could transform our relationship from personal to professional. Especially because of that. Jiho's thumb traces across her knuckles, the touch gentle but grounding. If what we're building together can't survive being integrated with work that matters to both of us, then it's not strong enough to build a life on. And if it can, then we'll have learned something valuable about love as collaboration instead of escape. As they prepare to leave the coffee shop, Jiho pulls out his sketch pad and tears off a page covered with architectural drawings. On the back, he writes something in careful script, then hands it to her. My grandmother's recipe for jar truth kimchi, he explains. She said the secret ingredient isn't in the vegetables or the spices. It's in being patient enough to let the truth ferment until it's ready to be tasted. Nadia looks at the recipe, noting measurements given in handfuls and pinches, timing described as until it tastes like home, and when the spirits say it's ready. This isn't exactly precision cooking, she observes. Neither is love, or authentic community building, or designing business models that prioritize human flourishing over profit maximization. So basically, everything I'm trying to learn how to do. Everything we're learning how to do together. As they walk toward the community center, where Mrs. Martinez waits with tamale masa and 40 years of accumulated wisdom about the difference between feeding bodies and nourishing souls, Nadia realizes she's about to attempt something unprecedented in her professional life, designing a system that measures success in human connection rather than revenue generation. The task ahead feels impossible, also necessary, also like the most important work she's ever attempted. Same time tomorrow? Jiho asks as they reach the community center steps. This time, Nadia's answer comes without hesitation. Every day until we get this right. Nadia's apartment at 4:47 a.m. looks like a war room designed by someone who's forgotten how to sleep. Her dining table has disappeared under layers of research printouts, community development case studies, and legal documents marked with increasingly frantic highlighting. Coffee cups in various stages of abandonment dot every surface. Archaeological evidence of a night spent trying to reinvent corporate social responsibility from scratch. She's been awake for 19 hours, fueled by caffeine and the growing certainty that she's attempting something either revolutionary or catastrophically naive. The alternative partnership proposal Henderson demanded exists now, as 17 pages of dense text that reads like love letters to community organizing, disguised as business strategy. Her phone buzzes with a text from her mother. Eleanor calling at this hour usually means crisis or breakthrough. Which is it? Nadia stares at the message, realizing she hasn't spoken to Eleanor in 3 weeks, the longest gap in their communication since college. In the focused intensity of discovering unscheduled joy and professional integrity, she's neglected the most important relationship in her life. Both. She texts back. Can you come over? I need advice from someone who's navigated bigger changes than this. Eleanor arrives 43 minutes later with a thermos of her famous breakfast tea and the patient expression of someone prepared for complicated conversations. She surveys Nadia's document-strewn apartment with the clinical assessment of a retired nurse encountering a particularly challenging diagnosis. Baby girl, she says finally, settling into Nadia's one remaining chair. You look like someone who's been wrestling with angels all night. More like wrestling with profit margins and moral obligations. Eleanor pours tea into 2 mismatched mugs, evidence of how thoroughly Nadia's usual attention to domestic perfection has dissolved. Tell me what's happening. The story tumbles out in fragments. Ji-ho and the subway encounter, the community center workshops, Mrs. Martinez's mole wisdom, Henderson's ultimatum, the ethical crisis of Clause 17. Eleanor listens with the focused attention she once brought to patients describing symptoms that didn't fit standard medical categories. So, Eleanor says when Nadia finally pauses for breath, you're risking your career for the chance to transform how your company engages with communities. And you're doing this because of feelings you've developed for a Korean chef who teaches cooking to senior citizens. That's a very reductive summary. Is it wrong? Nadia considers lying, offering a more professionally palatable version of events. Instead, she finds herself telling the truth. No, that's exactly what's happening. Eleanor sips her tea with the deliberate pace of someone who's learned that important conversations can't be rushed. Do you remember what you told me when you were 12 and decided you wanted to be an architect instead of following my nursing path? That I wanted to build things that would outlast me, instead of just helping people survive their immediate problems. And do you remember what I said? That building things that last requires understanding what people actually need, not just what they think they want. Wise 12-year-old. Eleanor's smile carries decades of accumulated pride. So what do these community center people actually need? Nadia looks at her research. Pages of data about funding models, sustainability metrics, community impact assessments. All useful information, but somehow missing the essential element she's been trying to capture. They need to be seen, she says finally. Not as beneficiaries of corporate charity or subjects for cultural documentation, but as experts in their own traditions, teachers with wisdom worth preserving, community members whose knowledge has value beyond what can be extracted and monetized. And your company's current approach doesn't provide that? Our current approach treats them like content providers for corporate storytelling initiatives. Eleanor sets down her tea and studies Nadia with the intense attention she once reserved for patients whose conditions required careful monitoring. Baby, are you sure this isn't just about the man? The question hits like cold water. What do you mean? Your father promised me adventure and authenticity and freedom from conventional expectations. Made me feel like everything I'd built before meeting him was somehow inadequate or inauthentic. When he left, I realized I'd been trying to become someone I thought he wanted instead of figuring out who I actually was. Nadia's stomach clenches. You think I'm repeating your mistakes? I think you're doing something much braver and scarier. I think you're discovering who you actually are while also falling in love, which is risky as hell, but also the only way to build something sustainable. How can you tell the difference? Eleanor moves to the window, where dawnlight reveals Seattle waking up to another day of purposeful ambition. Your father wanted me to abandon my nursing career because he thought conventional work was beneath artistic souls. You're risking your career to make your work align with your values. Do you see the difference? He wanted you to become less yourself. I'm trying to become more myself. Exactly. And this Ji-ho, is he asking you to change, or supporting you while you change yourself? Nadia thinks about their conversations, about the way he listens without trying to fix or direct. about how he's offered to help her design systems that serve community, even if it complicates their personal relationship. He's helping me figure out what I actually believe, then encouraging me to act on those beliefs even when it's terrifying. Then he's not your father, and you're not me at 25, abandoning responsibility for the illusion of authenticity. They stand together at the window, watching Seattle traffic begin its morning surge toward offices and meetings and daily obligations. Nadia's reflection in the glass shows someone who's aged years in weeks. Eyes brighter but tired, face more animated but stressed. Someone in the process of becoming rather than just maintaining. What if I'm wrong about all of this? Nadia asks quietly. What if community-centered business models are naive idealism that can't survive in competitive markets? What if I'm destroying my career for principles that sound beautiful but don't actually work? Then you'll learn something valuable about the difference between principles and fantasies. And if I'm right, then you'll have discovered work worth doing and love worth building a life around. Eleanor's phone buzzes with a text that makes her frown. I need to go, covering a shift for a colleague whose daughter is sick. But Nadia? She pauses at the door, keys in hand. Whatever happens with this proposal, I'm proud of you for choosing complexity over control. Even if I fail spectacularly? Especially if you fail spectacularly. Failure with integrity teaches you things that success with compromise never can. After Eleanor leaves, Nadia returns to her proposal with renewed focus. The words flow more easily now, as if her mother's blessing has unlocked something that was stuck. She writes about partnership models that prioritize community leadership, funding structures that sustain local programming, measurement systems that value cultural preservation alongside economic development. By the time she needs to leave for the Henderson presentation, she's created something unprecedented in her professional experience. A business proposal that reads like a love letter to human dignity, wrapped in enough financial projections to survive corporate scrutiny. Her phone buzzes with a text from Jiho. Mrs. Martinez made extra tamales for your big meeting today. She says food is the best preparation for important conversations. Ready to change the world? Nadia looks around her apartment, documents scattered like evidence of transformation, coffee cups marking the hours of a sleepless night spent choosing integrity over security, and realizes she's never felt more ready for anything in her life. Ready as I'll ever be, she texts back. See you on the other side of whatever happens next. As she gathers her materials and heads toward what might be either the end or the beginning of her career at Henderson Design, Nadia catches her reflection in the hallway mirror. She looks like someone who's been awake all night wrestling with questions that matter. For the first time in her adult life, she looks like someone who's chosen living over managing life. It's the most beautiful and terrifying thing she's ever seen. The Henderson Design boardroom has been transformed into something resembling a courtroom, with Nadia's proposal displayed on multiple screens, while Henderson, Marcus, and 3 senior partners she recognizes but has never actually spoken to arrange themselves in judgment formation around the polished conference table. The morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows feels harsh and clinical, nothing like the warm chaos of the community center kitchen, where this all began. Ms. Benson, Henderson begins, consulting the leather portfolio that contains either her professional salvation or execution order. Your proposal is certainly comprehensive. Thank you, sir. I didn't say it was good. I said it was comprehensive. Marcus shifts uncomfortably in his chair, the movement suggesting he's already calculated the probability of this meeting ending in disaster and found the odds unsatisfactory. Let's start with the financial projections. Henderson continues. You're suggesting we abandon immediate licensing revenue in favor of what you call long-term community partnership sustainability. Can you explain how that translates to quarterly profit margins? Nadia's mouth tastes like copper and caffeine. This is the moment she's been dreading. The part where she has to convince people who speak fluent capitalism to invest in outcomes that can't be easily monetized. Traditional community engagement generates short-term revenue through intellectual property extraction, but creates long-term liability through damaged relationships and cultural appropriation accusations, she begins. The alternative model I'm proposing generates sustainable revenue through genuine partnership development, community-led programming expansion, and reputation enhancement that attracts clients seeking authentic social impact initiatives. That's a lot of corporate buzzwords for we make less money now in hopes of maybe making more money later, observes Janet Morrison, the senior partner whose reputation for dissecting inadequate proposals is legendary. It's a business model based on building actual value instead of extracting artificial value from vulnerable communities. The silence that follows could be measured in heartbeats. Henderson makes a note in his portfolio that Nadia can't read, but assumes isn't flattering. Ms. Benson, says David Chen. Marcus's uncle, she realizes with growing dread. You've been with Henderson Design for 3 years. Your performance reviews consistently praise your ability to deliver results on time and under budget. Why are you now advocating for an approach that prioritizes community welfare over client profitability? The question is a trap wrapped in professional courtesy. Any answer that suggests her priorities have shifted implies that her previous work was ethically compromised, while defending her earlier approach undermines her current proposal. Because I've learned the difference between effective community engagement and performative community relations, she says finally. Henderson Design's reputation is built on delivering authentic solutions to complex problems. Our current approach to community partnerships delivers artificial solutions that create new problems, such as communities that feel exploited by corporate partners seeking content for marketing materials, cultural practices reduced to intellectual property that can be licensed and diluted, trust relationships that deteriorate when people realize they're being studied rather than served. Henderson leans forward slightly. And you believe your alternative approach addresses these concerns? I believe my alternative approach eliminates these concerns by redesigning the partnership structure to center community leadership and benefit community priorities first, at the cost of reduced profitability for Henderson Design, at the cost of short-term extraction profits in exchange for long-term partnership sustainability and enhanced reputation among clients seeking genuine social impact. Janet Morrison consults her own notes. Ms. Benson, your proposal includes a section about cultural reciprocity and knowledge sovereignty. These concepts sound more like graduate-level anthropology than practical business strategy. They're practical business strategy disguised as anthropological concepts. When communities maintain control over their cultural knowledge, they become sustainable partners rather than depleted resources. When partnerships are built on reciprocal benefit rather than extractive models, they generate ongoing value for all parties instead of short-term profit for one party. And you have evidence that this approach generates comparable revenue? This is the moment Nadia has been preparing for since her sleepless night of research and coffee-fueled calculation. I have evidence that it generates better revenue. Community-led programming initiatives have 73% higher participant retention rates and 45% higher satisfaction scores than corporate-managed initiatives. Organizations using reciprocal partnership models report 62% fewer reputation management crises and 38% higher employee satisfaction among staff working on community engagement projects. She clicks to the next slide, where months of research coalesce into charts and graphs that speak Henderson's language. More importantly, clients are increasingly seeking partners who can demonstrate authentic community relationships rather than performative community relations. Our current approach positions us as competent but conventional. The alternative approach positions us as innovative leaders in ethical business practice. Henderson studies the financial projections with the focused attention he usually reserves for quarterly reports. These numbers assume that clients will pay premium rates for what you're calling ethical community engagement. These numbers reflect what clients are already paying for ethical community engagement from organizations that have developed genuine expertise in community-centered approaches. And you believe Henderson Design can develop that expertise? I believe Henderson Design can learn that expertise from communities like the one at Riverside Community Center, if we approach them as teachers rather than content providers. David Chen makes a note that might be approval or condemnation. Ms. Benson, what happens if this experiment fails? What if community-centered approaches don't generate sufficient revenue to justify the investment? The question hangs in the air like smoke from something burning. Nadia thinks about Mrs. Martinez teaching her to taste test mole for proper seasoning, about Mr. Kim's patient explanation of healing through food, about Ji-ho's quiet confidence that authentic work creates its own sustainable outcomes. Then I'll take personal responsibility for the failure and resign, she says quietly. But I don't believe it will fail, because I've seen what authentic community engagement looks like when it's done with integrity instead of extraction. Henderson closes his portfolio and studies Nadia with an expression she can't interpret. Around the conference table, the senior partners exchange glances that seem to communicate in a language she hasn't learned to read. Finally, Henderson speaks. Ms. Benson, you're asking us to restructure our entire community engagement division based on insights you've gained from cooking classes with senior citizens. I'm asking you to restructure our community engagement division based on evidence that authentic relationship building generates more sustainable outcomes than performative charity initiatives. And if we approve this proposal, you'll personally oversee the implementation? Yes, sir. Including the dissolution of existing intellectual property claims outlined in Clause 17. Especially the dissolution of Clause 17. Henderson nods slowly. Very well. You have 6 months to demonstrate that community-centered engagement generates comparable revenue to traditional approaches. If successful, we'll expand the model to our entire community partnerships portfolio. If unsuccessful, I understand, sir. I don't think you do. Henderson's smile is sharp enough to cut glass. If unsuccessful, you'll not only resign, you'll also be personally liable for any revenue losses resulting from the restructured partnerships. The words hit like a physical blow. Nadia realizes she's just committed not only her career, but potentially her financial future to the belief that authentic community engagement is more valuable than extractive corporate partnerships. Do you accept those terms? Henderson asks. Nadia thinks about her apartment, with its meal prep containers and color-coded schedules, about the safe predictability of managing life instead of living it, about the person she was before Ji-ho asked if she wanted an airbag or a hug when life braked unexpectedly. I accept those terms, she says. As the meeting ends and the senior partners file out with expressions ranging from curious to skeptical, Marcus lingers behind. Nadia, he says quietly, I hope you know what you're doing. I don't, but I know it's the right thing to do. The right thing doesn't always pay rent. Neither does the wrong thing, if you factor in the cost to your soul. Marcus shakes his head as he leaves, muttering something about idealism and practical reality that Nadia chooses not to hear. Alone in the boardroom with its lingering scent of expensive cologne and competitive ambition, Nadia stares at the screen still displaying her proposal. 6 months to prove that love disguised as business strategy can survive in a world that measures everything in quarterly profits. Her phone buzzes with a text from Ji-ho. How did it go? Mrs. Martinez has victory tamales ready either way. She stares at the message, then types back. Either way is right. I'll tell you everything over tamales. As she gathers her materials and heads toward whatever comes next, Nadia realizes she's just bet everything on the possibility that the most important work happens not despite love, but because of it. For the first time in her adult life, the risk feels worth taking. The community center kitchen at 3 p.m. on a drizzling Thursday feels like the inside of a snow globe. Contained, warm, and slightly magical, despite the gray Seattle afternoon pressing against rain-streaked windows. Nadia arrives to find Ji-ho teaching Mrs. Martinez's great niece the proper technique for folding tamales, while Mr. Kim argues good-naturedly with Eleanor Washington about the optimal temperature for proofing bread. Mija! Mrs. Martinez calls from her station by the stove, where something aromatic simmers in a pot large enough to feed a small army. Come taste this and tell me if it needs more love. 3 weeks into the restructured partnership, Nadia has learned that needs more love is Mrs. Martinez's diagnostic tool for everything from under-seasoned soup to troubled relationships. She accepts the offered spoon of what appears to be pozole, a Mexican stew she's never encountered in her meal prep lifestyle, but now craves with the intensity of someone discovering a previously unknown essential nutrient. It's perfect, she says, meaning it. Nothing is perfect until it feeds people who are hungry for more than food, Mrs. Martinez corrects gently. Tonight we feed the bridge construction crew working late on the Aurora project. They asked if we could make something that tastes like home for people whose homes are far away. This is what the restructured partnership looks like in practice. Community-led programming that responds to actual needs rather than corporate assumptions about what communities should want. The bridge crew heard about the memory food workshops through word-of-mouth networks that don't appear in Henderson Design's demographic analyses, and Mrs. Martinez responded by organizing a dinner that serves 23 construction workers representing 8 different countries. "Where's your notebook?" Jiho asks, appearing at her elbow with flour-dusted hands and that half-smile that still makes her stomach flutter after 6 weeks of whatever it is they're building together. "What notebook?" "The one where you document everything for your progress reports. You haven't taken notes in 3 days." He's right. Nadia realizes she stopped trying to capture the community center experience in quantifiable metrics and started simply experiencing it. The shift happened gradually. First, she'd forgotten to time the workshops. Then she'd stopped calculating cost per participant ratios. Finally, she'd abandoned the evaluation forms altogether in favor of actually helping Need Mesa and listening to stories that can't be reduced to bullet points. "I stopped trying to measure what's happening here," she admits. "Started trusting that good things don't always fit in quarterly reports." And Henderson is okay with that approach? Henderson doesn't know about that approach, yet. They work in comfortable parallel motion. She helps Mrs. Martinez prepare pozole while he continues tamale instruction. But Nadia can feel Jiho's attention like warmth from a well-tended fire. 3 weeks ago, she would have found such focused attention uncomfortable, possibly problematic from a professional boundary perspective. Now it feels like coming home to herself. "Can I ask you something personal?" she says during a lull in the kitchen conversation. "Everything we do here is personal. Why cooking? Of all the ways you could have channeled your post-restaurant healing, why did you choose teaching people to prepare family recipes?" Jiho pauses in his tamale demonstration, considering the question with the seriousness he brings to properly seasoning soup. "My grandmother always said that cooking is the most intimate thing you can do for another person. You're literally transforming ingredients into nourishment using your own hands, your own knowledge, your own intention. That's beautiful, but it doesn't answer my question. When I left Le Bernardin, I realized I'd forgotten how to cook for people instead of cooking for critics. I'd become so focused on technical perfection that I'd lost connection to the reason cooking matters, because food is how we care for each other." He transfers finished tamales to a steamer with movements that suggest years of practice. "The seniors here don't care if my knife cuts are precisely uniform, or if my plating meets magazine standards. They care that I listen when they share their grandmother's techniques, that I remember their dietary restrictions, that I understand food as love made edible." Around them, the kitchen hums with quiet productivity. Mrs. Martinez's great-niece has mastered the tamale folding technique and moved on to helping Mr. Kim shape dinner rolls. Eleanor Washington provides running commentary on proper seasoning while supervising the cornbread that will accompany tonight's pozole feast. "What about you?" Jiho asks. "Why community engagement? Of all the ways you could have used your design skills, why did you choose trying to improve how corporations interact with communities?" The question catches her off guard. "I'm not sure I chose it. It chose me, I think." "Explain." Nadia considers how to translate 3 weeks of gradual revelation into coherent explanation. "I spent years trying to optimize my life. Better systems, more efficient processes, maximum productivity with minimum waste. But optimization without purpose just creates elaborate emptiness." "And you found purpose here?" "I found something better than purpose. I found people." The admission surprises her with its simplicity. All her research into community development theory, all her analysis of sustainable partnership models, all her careful documentation of cultural preservation practices, none of it captures the essential discovery that communities aren't problems to be solved, but relationships to be cultivated. "Mrs. Martinez," she calls across the kitchen, "can I ask you something?" "Always, mija." "Why did you agree to partner with Henderson Design?" What did you hope we could provide that you weren't already doing? Mrs. Martinez stops stirring the pozole and studies Nadia with the focused attention of someone who's learned to read between the lines of seemingly simple questions. You want the truth or the polite answer? Truth, always truth. We didn't need Henderson design for anything we couldn't do ourselves. We've been feeding people and sharing stories and building community for 47 years without corporate partnership. Nadia's stomach sinks. So why agree to the partnership? Because sometimes the people who think they're helping need help more than the people they're trying to serve. The words land like gentle slaps. Around the kitchen, conversations continue. Mr. Kim explaining bread-rising science to Eleanor's grandson. Ji-ho teaching proper tamale tying technique to a rotating group of volunteers. But Nadia feels suspended in a moment of crystalline understanding. You agreed to work with us because you thought we needed community more than you needed our services. Corporations are lonely places, Mrs. Martinez says matter-of-factly. Full of people who've forgotten how to share meals, tell stories, take care of each other. We figured if we taught you how to do those things, maybe you'd teach other corporations how to do them too. And if we couldn't learn? Mrs. Martinez's smile is warm enough to heat the entire kitchen. Then at least we'd have fed you properly while you tried. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of the bridge construction crew. 23 workers still wearing safety vests and work boots, bringing the smell of rain and honest labor into the kitchen's aromatic warmth. They represent a cross-section of Seattle's invisible workforce, immigrants from Mexico, Somalia, Ukraine, and half a dozen other countries whose primary common language is the shared experience of building infrastructure for a city that often forgets their existence. What follows over the next 2 hours defies every principle of efficient service delivery Nadia has ever learned. There are no name tags or formal introductions, no structured activities or predetermined learning objectives. Instead, there's the organic mixing that happens when people gather around food prepared with genuine care, stories shared in multiple languages, laughter that transcends cultural boundaries, the ancient human ritual of feeding and being fed. Nadia finds herself sitting between a Ukrainian welder named Dmitry and a Mexican rebar specialist named Carmen, both of whom speak limited English but fluent kindness. They teach her drinking songs in their respective languages, while she helps them navigate Mrs. Martinez's pozole assembly instructions. Ji-ho moves through the gathering like a gentle conductor, ensuring everyone feels included without making anyone feel managed. This is what community organizing actually looks like, she realizes, watching interactions that can't be quantified, but clearly generate profound value for everyone involved. Different from your corporate community engagement models? Ji-ho asks, appearing beside her with a bowl of pozole that somehow tastes better when consumed in this context than it would in isolation. Completely different. And completely better. As the evening winds down and the construction crew prepares to return to their late-shift bridge work, each worker approaches Mrs. Martinez with the formal courtesy of people who understand gratitude as an essential life skill. They offer payment for the meal, which she refuses, then attempt to negotiate future reciprocity. Skills exchanges, labor donations, invitations to family celebrations that create ongoing community connections. See? Mrs. Martinez murmurs to Nadia as they watch the last worker disappear into the rainy night. Community isn't something you build. It's something you feed until it grows strong enough to feed itself. Standing at the kitchen window, watching Seattle sparkle in the distance while Ji-ho helps clean the final pots, and Eleanor Washington packages leftover cornbread for people to take home, Nadia realizes she's witnessing something unprecedented in her professional experience, sustainable impact that generates its own momentum through authentic relationship building. Her phone buzzes with a text from Henderson. Quarterly review meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring preliminary assessment of community partnership outcomes. She stares at the message, then looks around the kitchen where tonight's magic continues in the form of quiet cleanup conversations and gentle teasing about who actually taught whom the best tamale technique. How do you quantify belonging? How do you measure the economic value of feeling genuinely seen and valued? How do you present quarterly reports on outcomes that can't be reduced to numbers but clearly transform lives? Everything okay? Ji-ho asks, noticing her contemplative expression. Everything's perfect, she says, meaning it. And I have no idea how to explain that to corporate executives who speak fluent spreadsheet, but barely understand human connection. Maybe that's tomorrow's challenge. Tonight, we're just people who shared good food and better company. As they walk together into the Seattle drizzle, umbrella held between them like a small shelter in the larger storm of uncertainty that surrounds everything they're building, Nadia realizes she's never felt more professionally vulnerable or personally grounded. Tomorrow, she'll attempt to translate tonight's magic into language that satisfies Henderson Design's quarterly metrics. Tonight, she's learning that some things matter more than measurement systems. It's the most frightening and liberating discovery of her adult life. Henderson Design's quarterly review meeting begins at precisely 9 a.m. with the aggressive efficiency of corporate machinery designed to process information and produce actionable outcomes. Nadia sits across from Henderson and the senior partners in the same boardroom where she'd risked everything 3 weeks earlier. But now the polished table reflects someone different. Hair slightly less controlled, clothes professional but somehow warmer. Eyes bright with the particular energy that comes from doing work that matters instead of just work that pays. Ms. Benson, Henderson begins, consulting the leather portfolio that has become as familiar as a medical chart documenting her professional health. Your preliminary report on the restructured community partnership is unconventional. Thank you, sir. Again, I didn't say it was good. I said it was unconventional. Marcus shifts uncomfortably beside her, the movement suggesting he's already reviewed her report and found it lacking in traditional business metrics. The document sitting before Henderson contains stories instead of statistics, qualitative outcomes instead of quantitative data, evidence of community impact that can't be easily reduced to profit margins. Let's start with the numbers, Janet Morrison interjects, her tone suggesting preparedness for disappointment. 3 weeks into the restructured partnership, what concrete results can you demonstrate? Nadia takes a breath that tastes like possibility and professional suicide in equal measure. Workshop attendance has increased 340% since we eliminated the documentation requirements and allowed community-led programming. Participant satisfaction scores are consistently above 95%, with waiting lists for all sessions. And revenue generation? The Community Center has secured 12 new funding partnerships through word-of-mouth recommendations from workshop participants. Total new annual funding, $47,000. Henderson's eyebrow rises slightly. Secured independently of Henderson Design involvement? Secured because of Henderson Design's authentic partnership approach. When community members trust that their cultural knowledge is being respected rather than extracted, they become advocates for the programming and connect it with potential supporters. David Chen makes a note that might indicate approval or preparation for cross-examination. Ms. Benson, your report mentions something called reciprocal capacity building. Can you explain what that means in practical business terms? This is the moment Nadia has been preparing for. The translation of community-centered outcomes into language that corporate decision-makers can understand and value. Traditional community engagement operates on a deficit model. Corporations provide resources to communities assumed to lack capacity for self-direction. Reciprocal capacity building operates on an asset model. Communities are recognized as experts in their own needs and experiences, while corporations learn to provide support that amplifies existing community strengths. And the business advantage of this approach? Community-led programming generates sustainable outcomes because it builds on existing relationships and cultural knowledge. Corporate-managed programming generates dependency because it replaces community capacity with external expertise. Janet Morrison consults her notes with the focused attention she usually reserves for financial projections that don't add up correctly. Ms. Benson, can you provide specific examples of this reciprocal capacity building in action? Last week, Mrs. Martinez organized a dinner for bridge construction workers. She identified the need, designed the response, recruited volunteers, and delivered the service without Henderson Design management or oversight. Our role was simply providing kitchen space and supplies. That sounds like community members doing volunteer work with Henderson Design resources. That sounds like community members demonstrating expertise in community care while Henderson Design learns how authentic engagement actually functions. The subtle correction hangs in the air like smoke from something burning. Nadia realizes she's just suggested that the corporate partners need education more than the community partners need services. A radical reframing of traditional consultant-client relationships. Henderson leans forward slightly. Ms. Benson, are you suggesting that Henderson Design's primary value in this partnership is as students rather than service providers? I'm suggesting that Henderson Design's sustainable value is in learning authentic community engagement practices that we can then offer to clients seeking genuine social impact outcomes rather than performative community relations. And you have evidence that clients are seeking such outcomes? This is the question Nadia has been hoping for. The opportunity to demonstrate that community-centered approaches aren't just ethically superior, but financially advantageous. 3 potential clients have inquired about our innovative community partnership model since word began spreading about the Riverside restructure. 2 are Fortune 500 companies seeking authentic community engagement strategies. 1 is a major foundation wanting to fund community-led programming initiatives. The conference room falls quiet, except for the hum of climate control and the distant sound of Seattle traffic. Henderson makes several notes in his portfolio, while the senior partners exchange glances that seem to communicate in corporate semaphore. Ms. Benson, Henderson says finally, your approach to this partnership has been educational for all of us. But I need to ask you directly, do you believe this model can generate sustainable revenue for Henderson Design? The question cuts to the heart of everything she's been learning about the difference between extractive profit and sustainable value creation. I believe this model generates more sustainable revenue because it creates ongoing partnership relationships instead of one-time consulting contracts. Explain. When we help communities amplify their own expertise instead of replacing it with our services, they become advocates for our approach rather than clients dependent on our continued involvement. That advocacy generates referrals, creates reputation enhancement, and positions Henderson Design as genuine innovators in ethical business practice. And if this approach fails to generate sufficient revenue, then I'll take personal responsibility for the experiment and resign, as agreed. Henderson nods slowly. Very well. Ms. Benson, you have 3 more months to demonstrate that community-centered engagement generates comparable revenue to traditional consulting models. During that time, you'll also oversee implementation of similar approaches with the 3 prospective clients you mentioned. Nadia's heart hammers against her ribs. She's just committed to scaling an experimental approach across multiple client relationships, while still learning what authentic community partnership actually requires. Do you accept those expanded terms? Henderson asks. Yes, sir. As the meeting ends and the senior partners file out with expressions ranging from cautiously optimistic to skeptically interested, Marcus lingers behind with the expression of someone preparing to deliver difficult news. Nadia, he says quietly, I hope you realize what you've just committed to. I think I'm beginning to. You're essentially redesigning Henderson Design's entire service model based on insights from cooking classes. I'm redesigning Henderson Design's community engagement approach based on evidence that authentic relationships generate more sustainable outcomes than performative partnerships. Marcus shakes his head. And if you're wrong, then I'll learn something valuable about the difference between idealism and realism. And if you're right, then we'll have discovered that the most profitable business model is one that prioritizes human dignity alongside financial outcomes. After Marcus leaves, Nadia remains in the empty boardroom, staring at her reflection in the polished table surface. 3 months to prove that love disguised as business strategy can survive corporate scrutiny. 3 months to scale community-centered approaches across multiple client relationships. 3 months to demonstrate that the most sustainable partnerships are built on reciprocal value creation rather than extractive profit maximization. Her phone buzzes with a text from Jiho. Mrs. Martinez wants to celebrate your presentation with her famous victory mole. Meet us at the market at 6? We're shopping for ingredients that can't be found in regular stores. She stares at the message, then looks around the corporate boardroom with its efficient fluorescent lighting and climate-controlled perfection. In 6 hours, she'll be wandering through Pike Place Market, with people who've taught her that the most important work happens not despite uncertainty, but because of it. On my way, she texts back, then adds, ready to learn what comes after taking the biggest risk of my professional life. As she gathers her materials and heads toward whatever comes next, Nadia realizes she's never felt more professionally vulnerable or personally grounded. The next 3 months will determine whether authentic community engagement can survive in competitive corporate environments. For the first time in her adult life, she's excited to find out. 2 months into her impossible deadline, Nadia stands in the lobby of Cascade Technologies, waiting for an elevator that will carry her to the 42nd floor, where she'll attempt to convince a room full of software executives that authentic community engagement is more valuable than algorithmic social impact optimization. Her briefcase contains no PowerPoint presentations, no demographic analyses, no competitive benchmarking studies. Instead, she carries testimonial letters from bridge construction workers, photos from community dinners, and a jar of Mrs. Martinez's mole that she plans to share during what she's privately calling the presentation of the heart. The elevator doors open to reveal Marcus, whose presence suggests either moral support or corporate oversight depending on his instructions from Henderson. Nervous? He asks as they rise toward their destination. Terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. That's not exactly the emotional state Henderson prefers for major client presentations. Henderson hired me to develop innovative community engagement approaches. This is what innovation looks like when it prioritizes human connection over performance metrics. Marcus studies her with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle that keeps changing shape. Nadia, you realize that if this presentation fails, you're not just risking your career. You're potentially damaging Henderson Design's reputation with a client who represents 12% of our annual revenue. And if it succeeds, then you'll have revolutionized how we approach community partnerships and positioned Henderson Design as a leader in ethical business practice. Those stakes seem worth the risk. The elevator opens onto a reception area that screams expensive minimalism, glass surfaces, geometric furniture, and digital art displays that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Nadia follows Marcus through corridors lined with awards for technological innovation and corporate social responsibility, each plaque representing achievements that prioritize measurable outcomes over meaningful relationships. The conference room contains 12 Cascade Technologies executives arranged around a table that could comfortably seat 24, their collective attention focused on tablets and smartphones that connect them to markets and metrics and data streams that reduce human experience to analyzable patterns. Ms. Benson, says Rebecca Chen, Cascade's Chief Innovation Officer, we're eager to hear about Henderson Design's community engagement innovations. Our current corporate social responsibility initiatives generate positive publicity, but limited authentic community impact. Nadia sets her briefcase on the polished table and takes a breath that tastes like possibility and professional suicide. Before we begin, I'd like to share something with you. She opens the jar of Mrs. Martinez's mole and places it in the center of the table alongside small paper cups she's brought from the community center kitchen. The rich, complex aroma immediately transforms the sterile conference room atmosphere. This is mole prepared by Rosa Martinez, a 72-year-old community leader who spent 47 years perfecting her great-grandmother's recipe. Each of you is welcome to taste it while I explain why authentic community engagement can't be optimized through algorithmic approaches. The executives exchange glances that range from curious to skeptical, but several reach for the paper cups with the cautious interest of people encountering something unexpected in familiar corporate environments. Traditional corporate social responsibility operates on a deficit model. Nadia begins, watching Rebecca Chen taste the mole with genuine surprise. Communities are assumed to lack resources, knowledge, or capacity for self-direction, while corporations provide solutions designed to address perceived deficiencies. That's standard practice across most industries, observes David Kim, Cascade's Director of Community Relations. And it generates standard results. Temporary improvements that require ongoing corporate management, communities that become dependent on external support, and social impact initiatives that benefit corporate reputation, more than community well-being. She clicks to her first slide, which shows a photograph of the community center kitchen filled with bridge construction workers sharing Mrs. Martinez's pozole dinner. Henderson Design's innovative approach operates on an asset model. Communities are recognized as experts in their own needs and experiences, while corporations learn to provide support that amplifies existing community strengths. Can you provide concrete examples of this approach in action? Asks Jennifer Walsh. Service without corporate management or oversight. Henderson Design's role was providing kitchen space and learning how authentic community leadership actually functions. And the measurable outcomes? This is the moment Nadia has been preparing for. The translation of human connection into language that satisfies corporate requirements for quantifiable impact. Workshop attendance increased 340% when community members gained control over programming decisions. Participant satisfaction scores consistently exceed 95%, with waiting lists for all sessions. The community center secured 12 new funding partnerships through word-of-mouth advocacy from participants who experience genuine value rather than performative charity. Rebecca Chen sets down her empty cup of mole, expression thoughtful. Ms. Benson, are you suggesting that corporate social responsibility initiatives are more effective when corporations prioritize learning from communities rather than providing services to communities? I'm suggesting that sustainable social impact requires recognizing communities as partners rather than beneficiaries, experts rather than clients, teachers rather than students. And you have evidence that this approach generates business value for corporate partners? Nadia clicks to her next slide, which displays testimonial letters from community center participants, handwritten notes in multiple languages expressing gratitude, not for charity received, but for dignity respected and wisdom valued. 3. Fortune 500 companies have inquired about Henderson Design's community partnership model since word spread about our innovative approach. 2 major foundations want to fund similar initiatives in other cities. Community-led programming generates authentic advocacy that traditional corporate social responsibility initiatives can't purchase or manufacture. Jennifer Walsh consults her tablet. Ms. Benson, how would this approach translate to Cascade Technologies' specific community engagement objectives? This is the question Nadia has been hoping for. The opportunity to demonstrate that community-centered approaches can be adapted to different corporate contexts without losing their essential authenticity. Instead of designing technological solutions for communities assumed to lack digital literacy, Cascade could partner with communities to understand how technology might support their existing priorities and capabilities. Instead of implementing pre-designed programs in underserved neighborhoods, Cascade could learn from community leaders about what technological resources would genuinely enhance their ongoing work. That sounds significantly more complex than our current corporate social responsibility model. It's more complex initially because it requires building genuine relationships rather than delivering predetermined services, but it's more sustainable long-term because it creates ongoing partnerships rather than temporary interventions. The conference room falls quiet, except for the hum of climate control and the distant sound of Seattle traffic 42 floors below. The executives study their tablets, consult their notes, and exchange glances that seem to communicate in corporate semaphore that Nadia hasn't learned to read. Finally, Rebecca Chen speaks. Ms. Benson, your approach to community engagement is certainly innovative, but I need to ask directly, can Henderson Design help Cascade Technologies develop authentic community partnerships that generate measurable business value? The question cuts to the heart of everything she's been learning about the difference between extractive corporate engagement and sustainable community partnership. Henderson Design can help Cascade Technologies learn to build relationships with communities that generate mutual benefit rather than one-sided value extraction. Whether that approach generates measurable business value depends on how you define value: quarterly profit margins, or sustainable reputation enhancement, short-term publicity, or long-term community advocacy. And if we choose the sustainable approach, then Henderson Design will help you discover that the most profitable business relationships are built on reciprocal respect rather than charitable condescension. Rebecca Chen closes her tablet and studies Nadia with focused attention. Very well. Henderson Design has 6 weeks to develop a pilot community partnership program for Cascade Technologies. If successful, we'll expand the approach across our entire corporate social responsibility portfolio. And if unsuccessful, then we'll return to traditional community engagement models and seek different consulting partners. As the meeting ends, and the Cascade executives file out with expressions ranging from intrigued to skeptical, Marcus approaches with the expression of someone who's witnessed something unprecedented. "Nadia," he says quietly, "I think you may have just revolutionized how Henderson Design approaches client relationships. I think I may have just committed to scaling an experimental approach across multiple corporate contexts while still learning what authentic community partnership actually requires. Are you ready for that level of responsibility?" Nadia looks around the conference room, where she's just risked everything on the belief that corporate social responsibility can be transformed from performative charity into genuine partnership. "I'm ready to learn what comes after choosing authenticity over efficiency." As they ride the elevator back to ground level, Nadia realizes she has 6 weeks to prove that love disguised as business strategy can survive in corporate environments designed to optimize profit rather than prioritize human dignity. Her phone buzzes with a text from Jiho. Mrs. Martinez wants to know how the mole performed in corporate combat. Victory dinner at 7? Despite everything, the impossible deadline, the expanded responsibility, the weight of having to prove that ethical business practices can survive in competitive markets, Nadia finds herself smiling in the descending elevator. "Victory is premature," she texts back, "but celebration feels necessary. See you at 7. For the first time in her professional life, she's discovered work worth risking everything to protect. The community center kitchen at 6:30 p.m. on a Tuesday evening has transformed into something resembling a war room, staffed by revolutionaries who wage their battles through acts of radical hospitality. Maps of Seattle neighborhoods cover one wall, marked with colored pins indicating potential community partnership sites. Recipe cards in multiple languages create a diverse library of cultural knowledge that can't be commodified or copyrighted. And in the center of it all, Mrs. Martinez orchestrates the controlled chaos with the quiet authority of someone who's spent decades turning individual ingredients into collective nourishment. "Mija," she calls to Nadia, who sits at a corner table surrounded by partnership proposals that need to be completed before tomorrow's Henderson Design deadline. "You can't create authentic community relationships through paperwork. Come help us prepare dinner and learn what you're actually trying to document." Nadia looks at the stack of client assessments, community needs analyses, and sustainable partnership frameworks that represent 6 weeks of 18-hour workdays. Then she looks at the kitchen where Jiho teaches Mr. Kim's nephew proper knife technique, while Eleanor Washington shares cornbread wisdom with 2 of Mrs. Martinez's great nieces. "I have deadlines," she protests weakly. "Deadlines don't feed people." Mrs. Martinez responds with the irrefutable logic of someone who's never confused efficiency with effectiveness. "People feed people. Come." What follows over the next 2 hours is a masterclass in community organizing disguised as dinner preparation. While Nadia helps chop vegetables for the evening's soup, a collaborative creation that incorporates Mr. Kim's Korean techniques, Mrs. Martinez's Mexican spices, and Eleanor's Southern seasoning wisdom. She listens to conversations that reveal the real work of building sustainable community relationships. "The Garfield Community Center called," Eleanor reports, while monitoring cornbread that somehow manages to be both sweet and savory, without sacrificing either quality. "They want to know if we can help them develop their own memory food programming." "What did you tell them?" Jiho asks, stirring soup with the focused attention he brings to everything involving proper flavor development. "I told them we'd be happy to share what we've learned, but they need to build programming around their own community's cultural knowledge and leadership capabilities." This is the conversation Nadia has been trying to capture in her partnership proposals. The organic way authentic community connections spread through relationship networks rather than corporate distribution systems. But listening to it happen naturally while engaged in the shared work of meal preparation teaches her things that can't be learned through documentation and analysis. "Mrs. Martinez," she says during a lull in the kitchen activity, Can I ask you something that might sound strange? Everything about this partnership has been strange, Mija. Ask. How do you measure success? When you're teaching someone your grandmother's mole recipe or organizing dinner for construction workers, how do you know if what you're doing is actually working? Mrs. Martinez stops stirring her soup and studies Nadia with the patient expression of someone who's been asked this question many times in many different forms. When my grandmother taught me to make mole, she didn't measure success by how many people ate it or how much money it could generate or whether anyone wrote articles about her cooking skills. Then how did she measure success? By whether the people who ate it felt loved. By whether the family stories got passed along with the recipe. By whether the meal brought people together instead of keeping them separate. Around them, the kitchen continues its productive hum. Vegetables being chopped, bread being kneaded, stories being shared in the multilingual soundtrack of genuine community building. Nadia realizes she's witnessing outcomes that matter more than anything in her partnership proposals, but can't be quantified in quarterly reports. The problem with your corporate world, Mrs. Martinez continues gently, is that you try to measure everything that's easy to count instead of counting the things that actually matter, such as whether people feel seen and valued, whether their knowledge gets respected instead of extracted, whether the work creates more connection or more isolation. Jiho approaches with a wooden spoon loaded with soup that represents the collaborative efforts of everyone in the kitchen. Taste, he says simply. The soup is complex, layered, impossible to reduce to individual ingredients or simple descriptors. It tastes like cultural exchange, like patient teaching, like the kind of nourishment that feeds souls alongside bodies. How would you document this in a client report? He asks. I wouldn't know how to begin. Maybe that's the answer. What do you mean? Maybe the things worth protecting can't be documented in client reports. Maybe authentic community building happens in spaces that corporate metrics can't measure or capture. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of unexpected guests. Rebecca Chen from Cascade Technologies, accompanied by two colleagues Nadia doesn't recognize. They stand in the doorway looking simultaneously curious and uncomfortable, professional attire contrasting sharply with the kitchen's warm chaos. Ms. Benson? Rebecca says, I hope we're not interrupting. Your assistant said we might find you here. Rebecca, this is unexpected. Nadia sets down her soup spoon and mentally calculates how to explain the gap between corporate presentations about community engagement and the reality of community engagement in action. We wanted to see the community programming firsthand before making final decisions about the Henderson Design Partnership. Mrs. Martinez appears at Nadia's elbow with the stealth of someone accustomed to managing complicated social situations. Are these your corporate friends, Mija? The ones who want to learn about authentic community building? Yes, ma'am. Rebecca Chen from Cascade Technologies. Mrs. Martinez extends her hand with formal dignity. Rosa Martinez, welcome to our kitchen. You're just in time for dinner. What follows is 2 hours of cultural diplomacy conducted through shared meals and gentle education. Rebecca and her colleagues find themselves chopping vegetables while learning about the difference between community service and community partnership, tasting soup while discussing sustainable funding models, helping with cleanup while discovering how authentic relationship building actually functions. This isn't what I expected from a corporate social responsibility program, Rebecca admits, while drying dishes alongside Mr. Kim, who's been patiently explaining the connection between cooking techniques and cultural preservation. What did you expect? Mrs. Martinez asks. Structured programming, measurable outcomes, clear service delivery models. Ah, Mrs. Martinez nods knowingly. You expected us to be grateful beneficiaries of corporate charity instead of experienced community leaders with knowledge worth learning from. The observation hangs in the kitchen air like steam from the evening's soup pot. Rebecca exchanges glances with her colleagues, corporate executives discovering that their assumptions about community engagement don't match the reality of community expertise. Mrs. Martinez, Rebecca says carefully, how would a partnership with Cascade Technologies need to function for it to genuinely serve your community's priorities? by recognizing that we already know how to take care of each other, by providing resources that amplify our existing work instead of replacing it with your programs, by learning from our experience instead of teaching us what you think we need to know. As the evening winds down and the Cascade executives prepare to return to their climate-controlled offices, Rebecca approaches Nadia with an expression that suggests something significant has shifted in her understanding. "Ms. Benson, I need to be honest. What I witnessed tonight challenges everything I thought I knew about corporate community engagement." "In what way?" "This community doesn't need Cascade technologies to teach them how to build relationships, organize programming, or serve their members. They need us to learn from their expertise and provide support that doesn't undermine their autonomy." "And how does that change your approach to partnership?" Rebecca looks around the kitchen where community members continue their quiet cleanup conversations, sharing responsibilities and stories with the easy familiarity of people who've created something worth sustaining. "It means we need to completely redesign our corporate social responsibility model. Instead of implementing our programs in underserved communities, we need to learn how communities like this one actually function and figure out how our resources can support their work without disrupting their relationships." As the Cascade executives disappear into the Seattle evening, Nadia realizes something unprecedented has just occurred. Corporate decision-makers have witnessed authentic community organizing and chosen learning over teaching, partnership over charity, complexity over efficiency. "How do you feel?" Jiho asks, appearing beside her as they watch the last visitors drive away. "Like I just witnessed a miracle disguised as a dinner party. Maybe that's what all the best miracles look like. Ordinary people choosing to see each other as fully human instead of partially useful." Standing in the community center doorway, watching Seattle sparkle in the distance while the kitchen behind them continues its gentle rhythm of connection and care, Nadia realizes she's discovered something more valuable than professional success. Work that makes the world more connected rather than more efficient. Her phone buzzes with a text from Henderson. "Cascade partnership approved. Congratulations on revolutionizing our entire community engagement approach. When can we discuss expansion opportunities?" She stares at the message, then looks back at the kitchen where Mrs. Martinez teaches Jiho a new technique for balancing flavors, while Mr. Kim shares stories that turn cooking lessons into cultural preservation projects. "Same time tomorrow?" Jiho asks, echoing the question that has become their daily ritual. This time, Nadia's answer comes without hesitation. "Every day for as long as you'll have me." For the first time in her adult life, she's discovered that the most important work happens not despite love, but because of it. 6 months after the subway encounter that changed everything, Nadia's apartment looks like it belongs to someone who's learned the difference between living and managing life. Meal prep containers have been replaced by a wooden spice rack that Mrs. Martinez insisted she needed for proper cooking that feeds the soul. Her color-coded calendar now includes blocks of time marked simply as unplanned, alongside professional commitments that she's chosen because they matter, rather than because they pay well. The 6 a.m. alarm that once orchestrated her regimented mornings has been replaced by sunlight streaming through windows she's learned to leave uncurtained, and the sound of her phone buzzing with a text from Jiho. "Mrs. Martinez wants to teach you her Christmas tamale recipe today. Fair warning, it takes 6 hours and requires infinite patience. Interested?" She stares at the message while coffee brews in the French press Eleanor gave her for her birthday, a gift that came with strict instructions about slowing down enough to appreciate properly prepared caffeine. 6 hours of unscheduled time would have horrified her 6 months ago. Now it sounds like exactly the kind of gift she's learned to give herself. "Infinitely interested," she texts back. "Should I bring anything besides patience?" "Just yourself, Mrs. Martinez says you have good hands now but still need practice with surrendering to the process." The community center kitchen at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning feels like the inside of a beloved family recipe. Warm, complex, and improved by the addition of whatever unexpected ingredients the day brings. Nadia arrives to find Mrs. Martinez already deep in tamale preparation, surrounded by bowls of masa, containers of filling that represent 3 days of careful preparation, and corn husks soaking in warm water like bath towels waiting to wrap gifts. "Mija," Mrs. Martinez calls without looking up from the masa she's testing for proper texture. "Come learn the most important lesson about tamales." Which is? They can't be rushed. Try to hurry the process and you ruin everything. Respect the timing, and you create something that feeds people's souls alongside their bodies. Jiho appears at her elbow with a coffee cup, and that half smile that still makes her stomach flutter after 6 months of whatever it is they've been building together. Ready for your final exam in patience? Is that what this is? Mrs. Martinez designed today as a test to see if you've really learned to trust process over product, presence over productivity. Around them, the kitchen fills with volunteers drawn by word-of-mouth networks that operate faster and more efficiently than any corporate communication system. Eleanor Washington arrives with her grandson, who's home from college and eager to learn family traditions he'll carry forward. Mr. Kim brings his daughter-in-law, a software engineer who's discovered that coding logic doesn't apply to proper seasoning techniques. 3 of Mrs. Martinez's great-nieces appear with boyfriends in tow, young men who've learned that earning family approval requires demonstrating respect for cultural knowledge. What follows over the next 6 hours is a masterclass in collaboration disguised as food preparation. Nadia finds herself working alongside people whose stories she's learned through months of shared meals and patient listening, immigrants and longtime residents, retirees and young professionals, people whose common language is the understanding that community gets built through small acts of mutual care, rather than grand gestures of charitable benevolence. "Tell me about the Henderson expansion," Jiho says during a break in the tamale assembly line, when they're sitting on the community center steps watching Seattle conduct its busy Saturday afternoon routine. 3 new corporate partnerships, 2 foundation grants, and a consulting contract with the mayor's office to redesign the city's approach to community engagement. That sounds like overwhelming success. It feels like overwhelming responsibility. Every day I wake up knowing that dozens of communities are trusting Henderson Design to facilitate partnerships that respect their expertise instead of extracting their cultural knowledge. Jiho studies her with the patient attention she's come to associate with all his important observations. And that responsibility scares you? It terrifies me. What if I can't scale authentic relationship building? What if corporate demands for efficiency undermine community priorities for autonomy? What if I'm accidentally creating systems that sound ethical but function extractively? Those are good fears. How are fears good? Because they mean you understand the stakes. People who aren't afraid of causing harm usually cause the most harm. They sit in comfortable silence, watching pedestrians navigate sidewalks with the focused intensity of people who know exactly where they're supposed to be. 6 months ago, Nadia would have been mentally calculating optimal routes and checking her phone for schedule updates. Now she finds herself noticing details that don't serve any productive purpose. The way afternoon light transforms ordinary buildings into architectural poetry. The sound of distant music from someone's open window. The particular satisfaction that comes from spending time without agenda. "Can I ask you something personal?" she says finally. "Everything we do is personal. Why did you stay? When I confessed about Clause 17 and the intellectual property extraction, why didn't you end things before they got complicated?" Jiho is quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the seriousness he brings to properly balancing soup seasoning. "Because I recognized something in you that I'd been looking for without knowing it." Which was? Someone willing to risk professional security for the chance to do work that matters. Someone choosing authenticity even when it's terrifying. Someone learning to trust relationships instead of just managing them. And you found that attractive? I found it essential. I've spent enough time with people who prioritize safety over growth, control over connection. You were learning to choose love over fear, even when love required giving up everything you thought you needed for security. Mrs. Martinez appears in the doorway, flour dusting her apron and satisfaction brightening her face. "Tamales are ready for steaming. Come learn the final lesson." Back in the kitchen, she guides them through the ritual of arranging tamales in the large steamer, each wrapped bundle representing hours of collaborative work and cultural knowledge that can't be reduced to recipe instructions. Now we wait, she announces. 45 minutes of steaming, no peeking, no rushing. Time for the most important ingredient to work. Which ingredient is that? Nadia asks. Faith. Faith that good things happen when you create proper conditions and then trust the process. As the tamales steam, the kitchen conversation turns to future projects, a partnership with the city's refugee services organization, plans for a community garden that will provide ingredients for culturally specific programming, discussions about training workshops that will help other communities develop their own memory food initiatives. Mrs. Martinez, Nadia says during a lull in the planning conversations, I need to ask you something important. Always, mija. A year from now, when the Henderson Design Partnership is fully established and generating sustainable funding, what will success look like from your perspective? Mrs. Martinez sets down her coffee cup and studies Nadia with the focused attention she usually reserves for tasting soup that needs final seasoning adjustments. Success will look like communities throughout Seattle feeling confident that their cultural knowledge gets respected instead of extracted. Success will look like corporate partners understanding that authentic engagement requires learning from communities instead of teaching communities what corporations think they need to know. And personally, what will success look like for you personally? Success will look like my great-nieces growing up in a world where their grandmother's recipes get valued as cultural treasures instead of commodified as intellectual property. Success will look like young people understanding that the most important work happens through patient relationship building rather than efficient problem solving. The timer announces that the tamales have finished steaming, and Mrs. Martinez ceremonially opens the pot to reveal dozens of perfectly cooked bundles. The kitchen fills with applause and the rich aroma of masa that has been transformed through heat, time, and collective intention into something that will nourish both bodies and relationships. Mija, Mrs. Martinez says, offering Nadia the first tamale with the formal dignity of someone bestowing an important honor. You have learned to cook with love instead of just following recipes. You have learned to trust process instead of controlling outcomes. Most importantly, you have learned that the best meals happen when everyone contributes something essential. As the afternoon dissolves into evening, and volunteers begin taking tamales home to families who will extend the day's community building into their own kitchens, Jiho approaches Nadia with an expression that suggests something significant is about to shift. Walk with me? He asks. They end up at Cary Park, where Seattle spreads below them in all its complicated urban beauty. Glass towers reflecting sunset light. Neighborhoods where communities like the one they've just left continue their patient work of building connection through shared meals and mutual care. I have something to tell you, Jiho says, settling beside her on a bench that provides optimal city viewing. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just important. He reaches into his jacket and produces a small wrapped package. This is for you. Inside the package is a kitchen timer, not digital or high-tech, but a simple mechanical device with the kind of satisfying tick that measures time in moments rather than productivity units. It's set for 47 minutes, he explains. The amount of time you agreed to risk on unplanned moments when we first started this adventure. And now? Now I want to ask if you're ready to risk something bigger. Such as? Jiho takes her hands in his, the touch sending familiar electricity through her nervous system, while anchoring her to something solid and real in a world that has become beautifully unpredictable. Such as building a life together. Such as combining your gift for designing sustainable systems with my gift for creating spaces where people feel genuinely nourished. Such as discovering what happens when two people choose love as collaboration instead of escape. Nadia looks at the timer in her hands, then at Jiho's face illuminated by Seattle's evening light, then at the city below where communities continue their patient work of caring for each other through small acts of radical hospitality. You're asking me to marry you using a kitchen timer as a metaphor for commitment? I'm asking you to build something with me that can't be optimized or scheduled, but might be the most important work either of us ever attempts. The timer in her hands ticks steadily, marking moments that matter not because they're productive, but because they're shared with someone who sees authenticity as more valuable than efficiency, connection as more sustainable than control. Yes, she says, surprising herself with how easily the word comes. Yes to all of it. Yes to building something together that prioritizes love over logic. Yes to discovering what happens when two people choose growth over safety. As Jiho kisses her with the patient thoroughness he brings to everything involving proper attention to essential details, the kitchen timer continues its steady tick, measuring moments that will matter not because they can be quantified, but because they transform two separate lives into something larger and more nourishing than either could create alone. For the first time in her adult life, Nadia has chosen a future that can't be planned, only lived. It's the most beautiful risk she's ever taken. 1 year later, Nadia stands in the kitchen of the house she and Jiho bought together in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, a 1920s craftsman with original hardwood floors, a garden space large enough for the herbs Mrs. Martinez insisted they needed, and a kitchen designed for collaboration rather than efficiency. The walls display photographs from community center dinners, sketches Jiho made during their early walks through unplanned neighborhoods, and a framed copy of the Henderson Design Partnership Agreement that revolutionized how corporations engage with communities throughout Seattle. The morning routine that once involved color-coded calendars and optimized productivity schedules has evolved into something more organic. Coffee prepared in the French press Eleanor gave her, followed by whatever combination of planning and spontaneity the day requires. Her digital planner still exists, but now it includes regular blocks of time marked unscheduled, alongside professional commitments she's chosen because they align with values she spent the past year learning to prioritize. "Ready for the big day?" Jiho asks, appearing in the doorway with flour-dusted hands and that half-smile that still makes her stomach flutter after 13 months of building something neither of them could have imagined when they first met on a subway car during an emergency brake situation. As ready as someone can be for presenting a year's worth of community partnership outcomes to the mayor's office while simultaneously getting married in a community center kitchen. Most people separate their professional triumphs from their wedding celebrations. Most people don't fall in love while revolutionizing corporate social responsibility practices. They've decided to hold their wedding ceremony at the Riverside Community Center, in the kitchen where they learned to trust process over product, presence over productivity. The guest list includes Henderson design colleagues alongside bridge construction workers, city officials alongside Mrs. Martinez's extended family, corporate executives alongside community leaders who've become genuine friends rather than professional contacts. "Mrs. Martinez called," Jiho reports, tying his apron with the focused attention he brings to all activities involving proper preparation. The mole is perfect. The tamales are steaming, and she's prepared a speech about love as collaborative cooking that she promises will make everyone cry in the best possible way. And the city presentation? Rebecca Chen confirmed that all the Cascade Technologies executives will attend, along with representatives from the 8 other corporations that have adopted Henderson Design's community-centered partnership model. Nadia looks around their kitchen, where evidence of authentic life building has replaced the sterile efficiency of her former apartment. Recipe cards in multiple languages create a diverse library of cultural knowledge that friends have shared during dinner parties that prioritize connection over entertainment. Mismatched dishes reflect the reality that the most important meals happen when people contribute whatever they have, rather than maintaining aesthetic consistency. The refrigerator displays a note written in Mrs. Martinez's careful script. Today, every minute is planned, but nothing is controlled. Perfect recipe for marriage and revolution. "Are you nervous?" Jiho asks, wrapping his arms around her from behind in a gesture that has become their daily ritual of mutual reassurance. About the presentation or the wedding? Both. Either. The fact that we're combining them into one event that could either be remembered as brilliantly unconventional or spectacularly chaotic. Nadia leans back against his chest, feeling the steady heartbeat that has become her favorite source of grounding when uncertainty threatens to overwhelm her capacity for trust. "I'm nervous about whether what we've built can survive scaling up. Whether authentic relationship building can function in corporate environments designed to optimize profit rather than prioritize human dignity. And the wedding part? The wedding part feels like the most natural thing in the world. Like we've been building toward this moment since that first subway conversation about airbags and hugs. They finish morning preparations in comfortable parallel motion. She reviews presentation notes while he prepares ingredients for the collaborative cooking demonstration that will serve as both wedding celebration and corporate education opportunity. The combination of professional preparation and personal anticipation creates an energy that feels both focused and expansive, like the moment before diving into water that might be deeper than expected, but is definitely worth the risk. At 10 a.m., they arrive at the community center to find it transformed into something that perfectly represents the intersection of authentic community building and innovative business practice. The kitchen has been arranged for both cooking instruction and formal presentation, with workstations that will allow corporate executives to learn tamale-making techniques while discussing sustainable partnership frameworks. Mija. Mrs. Martinez appears with the efficiency of someone who's spent decades orchestrating complicated celebrations, pulling Nadia into an embrace that smells like cinnamon and carries the warmth of genuine familial affection. Ready to show these corporate people what real partnership looks like? Ready as I'll ever be. Good, because they've been arriving for the past hour, and some of them look nervous about getting their hands dirty with actual cooking. The next 3 hours unfold as a carefully orchestrated demonstration of everything Nadia has learned about combining business innovation with authentic community engagement. Corporate executives find themselves learning to fold tamales while discussing sustainable funding models. City officials participate in collaborative mole preparation while hearing about community-led programming outcomes. Henderson Design colleagues share cooking duties with community members who've become genuine partners rather than subjects of corporate charity initiatives. Ms. Benson, says Mayor Patricia Williams, carefully spreading masa on a corn husk under Eleanor Washington's patient guidance. These partnership outcomes are remarkable. 12 communities now operating community-led programming, 8 corporations reporting improved community relationships, and a 73% increase in sustainable funding for cultural preservation projects. The outcomes reflect what happens when partnerships prioritize community leadership rather than corporate control, Nadia responds while helping Rebecca Chen master the proper tamale wrapping technique. When communities maintain autonomy over their cultural knowledge and programming decisions, they become advocates for the partnership rather than dependent beneficiaries of corporate charity. And Henderson Design's role in sustaining these partnerships? Learning, facilitating, providing resources that amplify existing community strengths rather than replacing them with corporate services. Mayor Williams nods while successfully completing her first tamale under Eleanor's approving supervision. The City Council wants to expand this model to all municipal community engagement initiatives. Are you prepared to help redesign how Seattle approaches partnership with its own residents? The question represents everything Nadia has been working toward: the opportunity to transform not just corporate community engagement, but municipal approaches to citizen relationship building. Henderson Design would be honored to facilitate that expansion, with the understanding that success depends on learning from communities, rather than implementing predetermined programs. As the formal presentation transitions into wedding ceremony preparation, Mrs. Martinez appears at Nadia's elbow with the stealth of someone preparing to bestow important wisdom. Mija, before you make your promises to this man, I need you to understand something about marriage as collaborative cooking. Which is, sometimes the recipe doesn't work the first time. Sometimes the seasoning needs adjustment, the timing requires patience, the proportions need rebalancing. But if you're cooking with someone who respects the process and trusts your instincts, you can create something nourishing even when the original plan falls apart. The wedding ceremony itself unfolds in the community center kitchen, surrounded by the people who've taught them that the most important work happens not despite love, but because of it. Jiho's grandmother participates via video call from Busan, offering blessings in Korean that Mrs. Martinez somehow understands and translates into Spanish wisdom about patience and persistence. Eleanor serves as Nadia's maid of honor, having earned the role through months of providing maternal guidance disguised as cooking instruction. Mr. Kim officiates, having been ordained online specifically for this occasion, because he insisted that someone who understands the healing power of properly prepared food should formalize their commitment to nourishing each other. Do you, Nadia Benson, promise to love Jiho Park with the same patience and attention you bring to learning new recipes? Willing to trust the process even when you can't control the outcome? I do. And do you, Jiho Park, promise to love Nadia Benson with the same generosity and wisdom you bring to teaching others, willing to share knowledge while remaining open to learning? I do. As they kiss to seal commitments that acknowledge love as collaborative work rather than romantic escape, the kitchen erupts in applause that includes corporate executives and community leaders, city officials and bridge construction workers, all united in celebration of something that transcends professional categories and speaks to the universal human need for genuine connection. The reception continues as a collaborative feast, with guests contributing dishes that represent their own cultural traditions, alongside the tamales and mole that have become symbols of successful partnership between different ways of knowing. Conversations flow between multiple languages and professional contexts, creating the kind of organic community building that can't be programmed, but emerges naturally when people feel genuinely valued for who they are, rather than what they can provide. As evening settles over Seattle and the last guests reluctantly prepare to leave, Henderson approaches Nadia with an expression that suggests something significant is about to shift. Ms. Benson, Mrs. Park, congratulations on both your marriage and your presentation today. The mayor's office wants to formalize our partnership for municipal community engagement redesign. That's wonderful news. It's also a considerable expansion of responsibility. Are you prepared to oversee Henderson Design's transformation into the region's leading consultancy for authentic community partnership development? Nadia looks around the kitchen, where she's learned the difference between efficient service delivery and sustainable relationship building, where corporate executives have discovered that authentic engagement requires learning from communities rather than teaching them what corporations think they need to know. I'm prepared to continue learning alongside communities that have been teaching sustainable partnership practices for generations. If Henderson Design can maintain that posture of respectful learning, then yes, I'm ready for whatever expansion opportunities emerge. As the evening wind down and volunteers begin the gentle process of community center cleanup, Jiho approaches with 2 cups of coffee and the expression of someone preparing to share important news. Mrs. Martinez has a proposal for us, he says. What kind of proposal? She wants us to help her write a cookbook. Not just recipes, but stories about how food builds community, how cooking preserves culture, how sharing meals creates the foundation for all other kinds of authentic partnership. A cookbook that's actually about community organizing? A cookbook that's actually about love as collaborative practice, food as cultural preservation, and cooking as the most fundamental form of caring for each other. Nadia accepts the coffee cup, ceramic, handmade by one of Mrs. Martinez's great nieces, imperfect in ways that make it more beautiful rather than less functional, and looks around the kitchen where she's learned that the most important work happens through patient relationship building rather than efficient problem solving. How long would a project like that take? Mrs. Martinez says it would take exactly as long as it takes. No rushing the fermentation, no optimizing the process, no controlling outcomes that depend on trusting relationships more than managing systems. Standing in the community center kitchen where they've learned to love each other through shared work rather than romantic fantasy, surrounded by evidence that authentic community partnership can survive and thrive in corporate environments, Nadia realizes she's discovered something more valuable than professional success, a way of life that prioritizes connection over control, presence over productivity, collaborative growth over individual advancement. Same time tomorrow? Jiho asks, echoing the question that has become their daily ritual of mutual commitment. This time, Nadia's answer carries the weight of marriage vows and professional partnership, personal growth and community responsibility. Every day, for as long as we're both learning how to build something together that nourishes everyone it touches. As they walk home through Seattle neighborhoods where communities continue their patient work of caring for each other through small acts of radical hospitality, Nadia realizes she's never felt more professionally challenged or personally grounded. The kitchen timer in her pocket, a wedding gift from Mrs. Martinez, no longer measures efficiency or productivity. Instead, It marks moments that matter because they're shared with people who understand that the most important work can't be optimized, only lived with full attention and infinite patience. For the first time in her adult life, she's built something that can't be planned, only trusted. It's the most beautiful commitment she's ever made. Childcare closing. 2 years after a subway car's emergency brake threw her sketches into a stranger's hands, Nadia Park, née Benson, stands in the Henderson Design Conference Room where she once risked everything on the belief that authentic human connection generates more sustainable outcomes than performative corporate charity. The polished table reflects someone transformed, hair touched with early gray that she's chosen not to hide, clothes professional but warmer, eyes bright with the particular energy that comes from work that feeds the soul alongside the career. The presentation displayed on multiple screens documents what has become known throughout Seattle as the Community Partnership Revolution, a comprehensive transformation of how corporations, municipalities, and nonprofits approach relationship building with the communities they claim to serve. 37 organizations now operate using Henderson Design's community-centered engagement model. 43 communities report increased autonomy over their cultural programming and sustainable funding streams. The model has been adapted for use in Portland, San Francisco, and Vancouver, with inquiries coming from cities as distant as Atlanta and Minneapolis. Mrs. Park, Henderson says, consulting the leather portfolio that has documented her professional evolution from efficient asset to revolutionary innovator. These outcomes exceed every projection we made when you first proposed restructuring our approach to community partnerships. The outcomes reflect what happens when partnerships prioritize mutual benefit rather than extractive profit generation, she responds, remembering the terror she felt 2 years ago when making similar statements with far less evidence to support them. Around the conference table, Henderson Design's senior partners review documents that read like love letters to sustainable community development, disguised as quarterly business reports. Revenue has increased 340% since the shift to community-centered approaches, with client satisfaction scores consistently above 95%, and a waiting list of organizations seeking to learn authentic engagement practices. The mayor's office wants to document the Seattle model for presentation to the National Conference of Mayors, Janet Morrison reports. They believe this approach could transform municipal community engagement across the country. And Henderson Design's role in that expansion? Training consultants, facilitating implementation workshops, and continuing to learn from communities that have been teaching sustainable partnership practices far longer than we've been documenting them. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle continues its daily rhythm of construction and commerce, ambition and achievement. But now Nadia sees also the less visible networks of care that sustain the city's human infrastructure. Community centers where families share cultural knowledge through collaborative cooking, neighborhood organizations where residents organize mutual aid through relationship building, informal networks where people practice the ancient art of caring for each other through small acts of radical hospitality. Mrs. Park, Henderson continues, you've essentially revolutionized not just our community engagement practices, but our understanding of what constitutes successful business relationship building. The question now is whether you're prepared to help other organizations undergo similar transformations. The invitation represents everything she's been working toward, and everything that terrifies her about scaling authentic relationship building. The opportunity to influence community partnership development across multiple cities, sectors, and organizational contexts, while maintaining the essential authenticity that makes the approach sustainable rather than extractive. I'm prepared to continue learning alongside communities and organizations willing to prioritize long-term relationship building over short-term efficiency optimization, she says. Success depends on maintaining genuine curiosity about what communities actually need, rather than assuming we already know what they should want. As the meeting ends and colleagues file out to return to their own revolutionary work, Marcus approaches with the expression of someone who's witnessed unprecedented transformation. Nadia, he says quietly, do you ever miss the simplicity of traditional consulting work? Clear deliverables, measurable outcomes, clients who wanted efficiency rather than authenticity? I miss the clarity, she admits. but I don't miss the emptiness of work that optimized systems without considering whether those systems actually served human flourishing. And now I wake up every morning knowing that the work we're doing today will determine whether communities feel respected as partners or extracted from as resources. It's terrifying and necessary, and the most important work I've ever been privileged to attempt. Her phone buzzes with a text from Jiho. Mrs. Martinez wants to celebrate the national expansion news with her famous victory mole. Community dinner at 6. The cookbook manuscript is ready for your final review. She stares at the message, then looks around the conference room where she's learned that the most sustainable business practices are built on the same foundations as the most nourishing personal relationships. Patience, respect, genuine curiosity about other people's experiences, and the willingness to prioritize long-term connection over short-term advantage. The cookbook project has become something neither she nor Jiho anticipated when Mrs. Martinez first proposed it. Not just a collection of recipes and stories, but a comprehensive guide to building community resilience through cultural knowledge preservation and collaborative resource sharing. Publishers are describing it as revolutionary community organizing disguised as food writing, with advance orders suggesting it will reach audiences far beyond traditional cookbook consumers. Victory dinner sounds perfect, she texts back. And I can't wait to read what Mrs. Martinez considers the final wisdom about love as collaborative practice. Walking through downtown Seattle toward the community center, where volunteers are already beginning dinner preparations, she passes the subway entrance where everything began with an emergency brake and an unexpected question about airbags versus hugs. The memory makes her smile, not just for the personal transformation it represents, but for the community-wide changes that emerged when one person chose vulnerability over control, authenticity over efficiency, collaborative partnership over extractive relationships. At the community center, she finds Jiho teaching tamale-making techniques to a group that includes corporate executives learning community engagement practices, city officials developing cultural competency skills, and neighborhood residents sharing knowledge that can't be commodified or copyrighted. The scene represents everything she's learned about the difference between sustainable partnership and performative charity. Real relationships that generate mutual benefit rather than temporary interventions that create dependency. Ready to change the world one community dinner at a time? Mrs. Martinez asks, appearing beside her with the stealth of someone who's spent decades orchestrating complicated celebrations. Ready to continue learning from communities that have been changing the world through collaborative care practices for generations, Nadia responds. As dinner preparations unfold around them, Nadia watches the organic choreography of genuine community building. Volunteers arriving with ingredients that represent their family traditions, conversations flowing between multiple languages and cultural contexts. The patient teaching that happens when experienced cooks share knowledge with eager learners. This is what sustainable partnership looks like when it's functioning properly. Mutual exchange that enriches everyone involved, rather than extractive relationships that benefit only one party. Mija, Mrs. Martinez says, pulling her aside while volunteers continue their collaborative meal preparation. I need to tell you something important about the cookbook. What about it? The publisher wants to create a whole series. Community building through cultural exchange. Books about how different communities use food, art, music, storytelling to preserve traditions while creating new connections. That sounds like an incredible opportunity. It is. But only if we can maintain control over how the stories get told. Only if communities keep ownership of their cultural knowledge instead of having it extracted and repackaged for mass consumption. The observation carries weight that extends far beyond cookbook publishing. Everything Nadia has learned about authentic partnership development applies to this moment. The difference between amplifying community voices and appropriating community wisdom, between providing platforms for cultural sharing and commodifying cultural practices, between supporting community-led projects and managing community resources for corporate benefit. What kind of control are you thinking about? She asks. Each community featured in the series participates in every decision, from which stories get included to how profits get distributed. Not just consultation, but genuine partnership where community members have equal voice in determining how their knowledge gets shared. That's a significantly more complex publishing model than traditional cookbook development. Complex, yes, but sustainable. Just like everything else we've learned about building relationships that last longer than the initial project funding. Around them, the community center kitchen fills with the particular energy that comes from shared work toward common goals. Volunteers move through familiar choreography of meal preparation while engaging in conversations that weave together personal updates, neighborhood news, and collaborative planning for future initiatives. This is what authentic community looks like when it's functioning at full capacity. People caring for each other through practical actions that create ongoing connection rather than temporary assistance. Eleanor Washington approaches with her grandson David, now in his second year of college but still returning regularly to learn family cooking traditions that he'll carry forward to his own eventual family. Nadia, honey, David wants to interview you for his sociology thesis about innovative community engagement practices. What's your research focus? She asks the young man who's grown several inches since she first met him in this kitchen 2 years ago. I'm studying how authentic relationships create more sustainable social change than traditional activism or corporate social responsibility initiatives. David explains with the earnest intensity of someone discovering ideas that challenge everything he thought he knew about social justice work. And what have you learned so far? That most social change efforts fail because they try to fix communities instead of learning from communities. That the most effective organizers are people who understand that their job is amplifying existing community strengths rather than providing solutions to perceived community deficits. The conversation represents everything Nadia has discovered about the difference between sustainable partnership and performative charity. David's generation is inheriting communities that have been subjected to decades of well-intentioned interventions designed by people who never bothered to ask what communities actually needed or wanted. Now, young leaders are learning to approach social change through relationship building rather than problem solving, collaboration rather than charity. What advice would you give to other organizations wanting to develop authentic community partnerships? David asks, pulling out a worn notebook that reminds her of her own early attempts to document community center experiences. Start with listening. Really listening, not just waiting for your turn to share your predetermined solutions. Spend time in community spaces without agenda, without trying to fix or improve anything. Learn how communities already take care of each other, then ask how you might support those existing efforts instead of replacing them with your programs. And if communities don't want partnership with outside organizations, then respect that decision. Some communities have been harmed by so many failed partnerships that they need time to heal before trusting new relationships. The most authentic thing an organization can do is demonstrate respect for community autonomy, even when that autonomy doesn't include them. Jiho appears with 3 bowls of the evening's collaborative soup, a creation that incorporates ingredients and techniques from multiple cultural traditions, seasoned with the patient wisdom of cooks who understand that the best meals happen when everyone contributes something essential. The soup tastes like community in its most nourishing form, complex, warming, impossible to reduce to simple ingredients, but clearly greater than the sum of its parts. How does it feel? He asks, settling beside her on the community center steps, where they've had dozens of important conversations over the past 2 years. How does what feel? Knowing that the work you started here has influenced community partnership development across multiple cities. Knowing that communities throughout the region now have more autonomy over their cultural programming because you chose to risk your career on the belief that authentic relationships matter more than extractive profit. Nadia considers the question while watching Seattle's evening traffic flow past the community center. 2 years ago, she would have measured success through individual achievement and professional advancement. Now she finds herself thinking about collective outcomes and community benefit, relationship sustainability, and cultural preservation. It feels like the beginning rather than the end, she says finally. Like we've learned enough about authentic partnership to recognize how much more there is to learn from communities that have been practicing collaborative care for generations. And personally, how does your life feel now compared to the scheduled efficiency of 2 years ago? She thinks about her apartment with its meal prep containers and color-coded calendar, about the person who measured every minute and managed every emotion. That version of herself feels like someone she once knew well, but wouldn't recognize as family anymore. It feels like I finally learned the difference between managing life and living it. Between optimizing systems and nourishing relationships. Between controlling outcomes and trusting processes that prioritize human dignity over predictable results. As evening settles over Seattle and community center volunteers begin the gentle ritual of collaborative cleanup, Mrs. Martinez approaches with the expression of someone preparing to share final wisdom. "Mija, before you and Jiho go home to your beautiful life, I need you to understand something about the work we've been doing together." "What's that?" "This isn't really about community engagement or corporate partnerships or revolutionary business practices. This is about learning to love each other well enough that we create conditions where everyone can flourish." The observation settles over Nadia like recognition of something she's known, but never articulated. Everything they've accomplished, the transformed corporate partnerships, the sustainable community funding, the model being adapted in cities across the region, all of it emerged from the simple decision to prioritize authentic relationship building over extractive efficiency. "Mrs. Martinez," she says, feeling tears prick her eyes, "thank you for teaching me that love is the most practical organizing principle, even when it doesn't look efficient to people who've forgotten how to trust collaborative processes. Mija, you taught yourself that. We just provided the kitchen where you could practice." Walking home through neighborhoods where communities continue their patient work of caring for each other through small acts of radical hospitality, Nadia and Jiho move with the easy rhythm of people who've learned to build something together that nourishes everyone it touches. Their house glows with warm light spilling from windows that frame a life chosen rather than merely managed. Bookshelves filled with community organizing texts alongside cookbooks from cultures around the world. Walls displaying photographs from community center dinners and sketches from their early walks through unplanned neighborhoods. "Same time tomorrow?" Jiho asks as they prepare for sleep, echoing the question that has become their daily ritual of mutual recommitment. "Every day," Nadia responds, meaning it with the weight of marriage vows and professional partnership, personal growth, and community responsibility. "Every day for as long as we're learning how to love each other and our work and our community well enough that everyone has what they need to flourish." In the darkness of their shared bedroom, she listens to Jiho's steady breathing and the distant sound of Seattle continuing its restless urban metabolism. Somewhere in the city, night shift workers are building infrastructure that will outlast their individual contributions. Somewhere else, community organizers are facilitating meetings where neighbors learn to care for each other through collaborative problem-solving. Throughout the region, people are discovering that the most sustainable social change happens through patient relationship building rather than efficient intervention management. The mechanical kitchen timer on her nightstand, the same device Jiho gave her as an engagement gift, no longer measures efficiency or productivity. Instead, it sits silent except for the rare occasions when they want to be reminded that some processes can't be rushed, only trusted with infinite patience and careful attention. 2 years ago, Nadia Benson lived on autopilot, every minute scheduled, and every emotion managed through systems designed to eliminate unpredictability. Tonight, Nadia Park falls asleep in a life she couldn't have planned but wouldn't trade for any amount of security or control. She's learned that the most important work happens not despite uncertainty, but because of it. Not despite the impossibility of managing outcomes, but because of the willingness to trust processes that prioritize human dignity over quarterly profit margins. It's the most beautiful risk she's ever taken, and tomorrow she'll wake up ready to take it again.